Good morning, everyone. Can I get everybody's attention, please? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ricardo Carlo. I'm the president of the Associated Minority Contractors of Arizona. Have had the honor to be at the helm of this organization for almost 20 years now. It's a great organization providing opportunities for small businesses, and without any of your support, that wouldn't be possible as well, because we work very closely with most of you in the room as it is. So why is this conference so important? This is our second annual. We did our inaugural last year, and we were amazed at the turnout and the participation of everybody who wanted information about inclusion, how important it is in our industry today. And so that's the reason why we continue this, and there's going to be more talk about the inclusion piece of it, and I don't want to jump into that, so I'm going to leave that to Tracy when she comes up here to talk about it, okay? I want to thank all of our sponsors, but on behalf of the AMCA Board of Directors, the staff, and myself, we want to welcome you to this great event. At this point in time, I want to recognize our Board of Directors. So as I call your name, would you please stand? And then if you'll hold your applause after we get done with that, the sooner we get going on with the green program. So Patty Oles, our board chair. She's in the back over there. Ross Dietrich, Price Kong, our vice chair. Sherry Hill with Arizona Public Service, who's our secretary, and unfortunately is not here. Our treasurer, Tracy Sanders with Sundt Construction. Corporate and Mechanical, Sherry Maurice. Crest Insurance Group, Nicholas Otero. Davenport Management, Anthony Davenport, stay standing. Hensel Phelps Construction, Rosemary Middleton. Analyst Companies, Debbie Stephen. Law Enforcement Specialist, Bonnie Lucas. MR Construction, Juan Carlos Villegas. National Bank of Arizona, George Sarkis. Raymond Concrete, Raymond Gonzalez Sr., and Julia Villarreal with Salt River Project. So let's give them all a round of applause, because without all of them, this organization would not function the way it does. We have a working board, and they do everything they can to keep this organization sustainable and moving forward, and keeping me on the books, I guess. So at this point in time, I want to go ahead and bring up Tracy Sanders, who is going to be our Mistress of Ceremonies for the event. Again, thank you all for coming. I appreciate you coming out.
Well, good morning, everyone. Come on, give it to me like it's a good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yes, indeed. It is a good morning. Here we are in the Valley of the Sun, and this week is Construction Inclusion Week, right? Give that a round of applause. Even tell your neighbor, look at him. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. There we go. Awesome. Let your neighbor know I'm glad you're here. Because this is about inclusion, right? With this week being Construction Inclusion Week, industry-wide, it is a phenomenal time. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But this here, you're sitting in our second annual Construction Inclusion Conference. That's right. This is a conference very, very specific to DEI, but it's one of a kind. It is one of a kind, not just because here locally we have a conference that has been inspired by Construction Inclusion Week, but even for the industry, we have a conference for the construction industry all about DEI. So that is something to truly, truly embrace and to be proud of. And I'm just so, I'm ecstatic that we have all the attendees in the room. It really shows your understanding of the importance of it, as well as, what we're doing this week with Construction Inclusion Week. So, Construction Inclusion Week was derived 3 years ago by the big six in our industry, in the construction industry. And as it was derived, basically they felt that the construction industry needed to embrace the concepts of DEI that much more. And so hence we have Construction Inclusion Week. Each day of Construction Inclusion Week, CIW, has a focus where individuals can learn, deep dive, have table talks, toolbox talks, you name it, on how to really understand and implement DEI in the workforce, in your workplaces, as well as within the community. So I encourage you all, if you have not gone over to constructioninclusionweek.com, do that today. You're going to go over there and be able to find all kinds of resources and information so that you as an individual or your company can really, really deep dive and really show your dedication, your understanding, and your commitment to the concepts of DEI and the power that it brings. Now, you may say, okay, well, AMCA, here on, and we have, all of these construction. Well, isn't this really about supplier diversity or supposed to be about, small business and supplier diversity? Well, one of those days during the Construction Inclusion Week today happens to be all about supplier diversity. And you may be thinking, well, yeah, supplier diversity and DEI. I'm still confused. How in the world does that fit together? How does small business, how does supplier diversity get up under DEI in those concepts? Because I'm aware that in your mind, you may be thinking DEI is all about HR or the workplace and that type of thing. Well, when you take a look at supplier diversity, DEI provides framework and inclusion for small businesses, or XBE. Who's ever heard of the term XBE yet? Some have, some haven't. So let me school you this morning, get some extra information around supplier diversity. So XBE is an up and coming acronym, if you will, or term that allows you to kind of bring all those tongue-twisting acronyms for small business all under one umbrella. When you're trying to say MEBE, WEBE, and DBE, and MBE, and SWOBBE, and so on and so forth, right? Exactly. You can say XBE, and that will help you to capture all of those categories without getting so tongue-tied and trying to say it all. So XBE utilization is what some call it, or small business or supplier diversity. So what DEI does is it gives diverse businesses opportunity, equitable, fair opportunities. So look at that, diverse businesses, equitable opportunities to be included on procurement and contracts. That is DEI. And that is how DEI supports small business or supplier diversity overall. And so I'm just very, very excited that this Construction Inclusion Conference on the day of Supplier Diversity Day within the Construction Inclusion Week is really having this event so that us here locally, we can learn more about it and really implement it on a higher, more in-depth scale. So when you take a look at the framework of DEI, I want to give you a little bit more information. When you take a look at the framework of DEI, if it were an umbrella, think of the umbrella in your head, it would have two handles to it. One handle would be that XBE utilization. The other handle would be workforce. And so that is the beauty of how DEI helps to support a holistic approach to culture, a holistic approach to everyone truly being supported and empowered to succeed, no matter what the entity may be. So that is something to really be proud to be a part of. And once you continue to understand how to implement the concepts of DEI, your firm or even yourself is that much more knowledgeable and on a greater track to really embrace the power and harness the power that DEI brings. So I must encourage you to please go over to constructioninclusionweek.com and get that information. There are even assessments there. Those assessments will allow you to learn, am I at the beginning stage, of implementing DEI? Am I intermediate? Or am I on a more advanced stage? Where are we so that we can assess how to set goals to truly reach those milestones that we want to reach for yourself or for your company, all right, or for your firm. So just keep that in mind, okay? So awesome stuff. I welcome you again. And now I want to give some acknowledgement to our sponsors before I call up our keynote speaker. All right, so for our sponsors for this Construction Inclusion Conference 2023, come on, give me another hand clap. Here we go. I gotta wake you up. That's right, we gotta wake up. We gotta give this information because I want you to fully today be present and be as present as you can and really absorb all the information, all of the opportunity that you have here at this conference. This is about networking, this is about learning, this is about growing yourself, growing your knowledge, right? So listen up. So thank you to our sponsors. We have our platinum sponsor, benefactor of AMCA's annual program, Hensel Phelps. Thank you, Hensel Phelps. Yes. We have our trailblazing sponsor, Sundt Construction. That would be my company. Thank you. We have our venue sponsor, National Bank of Arizona. Thank you, National Bank. We have our starting strong sponsor, that is our breakfast sponsor, McCarthy Building Companies. Thank you, McCarthy. We have our fueling up sponsor, drink and snacks. That's going to be Ames Construction. I don't have my glasses or contacts on, so there you go. And then we have our taking notes sponsor. That is our program sponsor, Ryan Companies. Give them a round of applause, indeed. Asking questions, this is our name badge sponsor, that's Nichol Corporation. Supplier Diversity Day sponsor, that's going to be PriceCom CPAs. Thank you so much. And our printing sponsor is Graphic Ideals. Big hand of applause. All of these entities and firms have truly come together and teamed to make this conference what it is today. But the other part of that work is the work that you will do. And that is what I mentioned, to truly be present, truly connect, get outside of your box, meet some individuals, make some meaningful connections, be intentional. That's one thing about DEI. You can hire diverse people or, diverse companies, bring them on. That's diversity. You have to take a look at equity, which is not the same as equality. Equity is all about leveling the playing field, truly intentionally taking a look at ways that you can make sure that everyone has what they need in order to win so that the whole team wins. That's equity. And then inclusion has to be intentional. You have to be intentional about inclusion. It just doesn't happen. So today I want you to be intentional about those concepts and about really grabbing and embracing everything that we have to offer here at Construction Inclusion Conference 2023. And so now I'm going to bring up our keynote speaker. This individual is, wow. Let me just say, wow. Colette Holt. She represents public agencies and private firms on issues related to civil rights, public contracting, and affirmative action. She has a broad experience in conducting defensible disparity studies, expert witness consulting, and testimonies. She serves as general counsel to the American Contract Compliance Association and is an author and frequent media commentator on those issues. Mrs. Holt, she has gotten her BA of philosophy from Yale University, her JD from the University of Chicago Law, and she was a law clerk to the former chief judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. Please join me in giving a great round of applause for Ms. Colette Holt.
So good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to Arizona. I love to come here. When my husband and I were thinking about moving out to California, we actually came and looked out here. But we ended up in San Antonio, Texas, because that's where his mother is. For those of you know Texas, his family's from down in the valley. And we were glad that we were there with COVID and everything else. But I'm always happy to come here. Got a lot of friends here. Thank you so much to Wendy and to Patty for inviting me. I've known them both for a long time. So I have to tell you that I feel like the skunk at breakfast, because what I'm going to share with you today is what is happening from a legal perspective. I am a lawyer. I've been involved in these issues since I was an assistant corporation counsel for the city of Chicago when the Richmond versus Croson decision came down. Wave your hand if that's anything you've ever heard about the Croson case. Looks like no. Okay. Well, that helps me to kind of know where we're starting. Because I think people really have to have an understanding now of what's going on out here in the courts. For all these years, we have been running our programs, and now we have this relatively new term, DEI. The first time I had to go online and Google that. What does that mean? And so the conversation has been broadened and deepened substantially over the decades. But where the federal courts are going is in a very, very different direction. And I think contractors, both minority and women and larger non-diverse firms really need to know what's happening out here, because it is going to, in fact, impact what happens to these programs. So with that, I have a relatively brief presentation. Let's see. Okay. I have been basically giving some version of this talk since the 30th of June, because the Supreme Court's decision in the Students for Fair Admissions case, that's the affirmative action case, came down on June 28th. So I basically have done nothing but talk about this since then, because I think it is so important that people understand the ramifications. In the beginning, there was this sort of idea out here that, oh, well, that's admissions, that has nothing to do with contract. Wrong. And there's been a series of cases leading up to this one, and there are more since then that I really think you need to know about. So I'm just going to talk about the majority opinion. There's lots to be said about that case. For those of you that like that kind of thing, certainly do read the concurrences and the very passionate dissent in that case. But this will give you a sense of where the Supreme Court is. And of course, that means where the lower federal courts are going to go. Justice Roberts says that race-based state action must be rare. Now, if we are honest with ourselves, I would not call minority and women and disadvantaged business programs rare. Many, many agencies have them. Of course, if you are a recipient of the United States Department of Transportation money, you have to have a disadvantaged business program. I was interested to hear this idea about XBE. I have been hearing that, and I'm happy to talk about that with people. I think there are issues with this, or there would be legal issues anyway, because the courts are treating these programs very differently. Admissions programs, which were for Harvard and the University of North Carolina, must meet a constitutional test called strict scrutiny. Now that's a whole good 2-hour conversation about what that means. But in a really brief summary, it means that you have to have a lot of evidence that you have a problem with the specific group you want to include. It can't be kind of this general idea. And that any program that you have has to be narrowly tailored to the evidence that you present. It is the highest level of judicial scrutiny. The federal courts are extraordinarily hostile to these programs. I think we all that are in this business are so steeped in the concepts of civil rights and DEI. Federal judges are looking at this through a very different lens. And Justice Roberts says that in only 2 instances has the Supreme Court ever recognized that race, and we're talking about race now, I'll get to gender in a second, that race-based state action is acceptable. And the first is identified instances of intentional discrimination. That's people writing bad words, which I will not say this morning, on people's trailers, or saying, I don't want to work with you, or calling you names, intentional identified instances. And the second was to avoid a prison race riot. He says that's it. That when you start thinking about how does that fit in with the whole concept of DEI and inclusion, you're going to, by the time I'm done, I think, at least I hope, that you'll have some understanding of how the courts are looking at this, and it is very, very different. He also says that the admissions programs are not sufficiently coherent, basically, in order to be reviewed by courts. He rejects the concept of diversity. This is really important because, of course, the universities have argued that training future leaders, getting many varieties of viewpoints, all the reasons that we think about why inclusion is a good thing, He says it's too mushy. Can't measure it, we don't really know what it is, and so that's not gonna be good enough. That he says that there's no meaningful connection between the emissions programs and the goals. And that the programs are both overbroad. He goes into this whole issue about it's Asians, not South Asians and whatnot, or arbitrary. He says Hispanics is an arbitrary term, which I find particularly odd, given that the universities have used the Census Bureau's definition. We really do know what that means. He might disagree with it, but I wouldn't have exactly called it arbitrary, or that it's under-inclusive because people from the Middle East were not included in the program, because Middle Eastern, North African individuals have generally been considered to be white. He says that race may never be used as a negative factor. Well, it's hard to know what kind of program you would have that wouldn't be negative to the people who aren't in it. So this one strikes me as particularly disingenuous. Race may not operate as a stereotype, that you can't assume that people who are from the same racial background are all going to be alike or think the same, and that that's stereotypical thinking. The programs must have an end point. The universities had argued, well, we reevaluate our programs on a regular basis, and the court said, no, the programs must end at some point. Doesn't say at what point, but some point. He does throw applicants a bone if you can talk about race maybe in your college admissions application essay. I'm really glad I don't have a high school senior. I don't know what that means. And then there's this very curious footnote that says, well, but this decision doesn't apply to the service academies because they may have different interests. Well, we're going to find out, because both West Point and the Naval Academy have already been sued. So we're going to find out what that means. So that's fair admissions. So the immediate spillover was into a case that is a challenge to the Minority Business Development Agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce, which has been around since the Nixon administration. So we sort of thought this was not controversial, you get. But they were sued, and full disclosure, I'm the U.S. Department of Justice's expert in this case. So I know quite a lot about it for people that want more information. But so far, we are losing. I actually, as soon as I get to the someplace this afternoon, have to do another declaration and another submission for this case. But so far, we are losing. The court so far has said that there is no compelling interest, that's back to that strict scrutiny framework, that there's no evidence for all the groups that MBDA helps, and all the types of businesses that are eligible for assistance. Particularly worrisome, the court says that broad statistical disparities are not sufficient, which goes to this whole concept of disparity studies. So I'll get to those in a little bit. That any disparities that you find must be linked to intentional discrimination, and you have to eliminate all variables. Well, I've been doing minority business race research for 30 plus years now, and I just have to tell you honestly, this is an impossible test to meet. We will not be able to say that, for example, if we find statistically significant disparities between the availability of, let's say, Latinos to do work for Valley Transit, we can't link that to any intentional discrimination by anybody. We will not be able to do that. So what they are setting up are tests that we cannot meet. And finally, that the government must have participated in the past discrimination it now seeks to remedy. He also goes on to tell us that the program is not narrowly tailored. That's that other element of strict scrutiny I was mentioning. He says that race-neutral measures have not been tried, and the government has failed to show that there are, no workable race-neutral alternatives that will work. We did have a report that we submitted, again, full disclosure, I was part of writing that, and the court said, well, it doesn't tell us how effective the programs are, or who's tried race-neutral measures, and how well they work. And again, that's true. Finally, he says that the program is over-inclusive because it includes people who somehow might not have been subject to discrimination. So at the moment, only the centers in Wisconsin, Orlando, and DFW have been enjoined from providing services. because that's where the 3 plaintiffs are located, but go ahead and assume there are going to be more. Now, this Ultimate Services case is one you may have heard a little bit more about. This is a challenge to the 8A program of the SBA. Anybody in here ever been an 8A contractor? Anybody been through 8A? No? Okay. Well, that's good, because it may not be around too much longer. But 8A is a program, again, that has decades of implementation, where socially and economically disadvantaged firms were able to have contracts set aside for them. They have very elaborate mentor protege programs and other types of assistance. Again, the court says it's not based on a compelling interest. Again, no evidence for all the groups and all the businesses. It's the same exact stuff in the other opinions. So one of the things that you're going to start to see is the creation of a body of law that is self-referential. The cases all refer back to each other, and I'm going to be blunt about this. These judges are all Trump appointees who came up through what's called the Federalist Society, and that's been in the news a little bit more lately. That's one of the groups that Clarence Thomas pals around with. And I think they all got the same memo, because all the cases read exactly the same. Also, since the program's not narrowly tailored, there's no termination date, there are no goals. So the SBA's response to this has been to now require individual narratives of social and economic disadvantage. The plaintiffs are taking the position that actually the opinion and the injunction strikes down 8A contracts altogether. So they were back in federal court, I think it was the 25th of September. I deal with those lawyers all the time, same basic group of lawyers from DOJ. So we'll see what happens with that. Anybody in here a certified DVE with like Arizona DOT or Valley or the rest of you? Okay. Well, then you know that in the DVE program, there is the presumption of social and economic disadvantage. If this approach holds, you will now be required to fill out this very extensive narrative about all the discrimination that you suffered in order to stay in the program. And that's assuming even that holds up, which is an open question. All right, is everybody sufficiently depressed? So I said, I'm like the skunk at breakfast. And there are other cases, because this was we had a short time frame. I mean, I got like a 2 hour, I have various versions of this now. So this is kind of the shortish version. But for example, the city of Houston has been sued over its minority business program. Bexar County, Texas, which is San Antonio, where I live now, was sued over using minority women business certifications as a leg up to getting what was left of ARPA money. Cook County, Illinois, which is Chicago, was also sued. So these programs are under attack, and it's a different level of plaintiff than we used to have. Back in the day, I guess I can say that now, right? It used to be that somebody decided, well, I don't like these programs, and he called this construction lawyer who did lien releases, and we got sued. And quite frankly, the other side made a lot of rookie mistakes trying federal constitutional cases. That's not what we have now. There is a very organized, interlocking group of legal organizations that are extraordinarily well-funded that are bringing these cases. So for example, Cook County, the guy who sued them is represented by the Wisconsin Center for Constitutional Rights. Bexar County was sued by some people on the West Coast. So it's not the litigation environment we used to operate in. And that's one of the things that's so frightening. So just to really bring it home, the Federalist Society, Leonard Leo, those folks, got a $1.6 billion donation. That's with a B. You can buy a lot of litigation for $1 billion. So people really need to understand the threat level that's out here. Okay, so now that we are all sufficiently depressed, as I say, welcome to my world. I talk about this all day, every day. So what can we do? So I particularly want to focus on what agencies could do, because I think they're going to be the first line, because they're going to be the defendants. But let me stop there for a second. There have been plenty of lawsuits against private sector programs, which I didn't expect. I thought the first shot across the bow would be to the DBE program, which has been sued once and will be sued again, I guarantee it. But in fact, the biggest onslaught has been against private sector programs. So Target, American Express, JP Morgan Chase, law firms that had their little minority internship, because we all know that big law does, white people are discriminated against there, okay? They've all been sued and mostly folded, by the way. So it is not the case that we're going to go, well, okay, this is all just public sector. No, they are going after all the private sector programs and DEI. Stephen Miller, anybody remember him? From the Trump administration? He of the architect of the children in the cages policy, that guy, has founded something called America First Legal. And they have filed several dozen complaints with the EEOC against people's DEI employment programs. So all I can say to people is, it's on. It really is. I've been worried about this for a couple of years. There were some earlier cases that we lost, like the black farmer cases, that I think were a precursor to where we are, but that's where we are now. Okay, so what can we do? If you're an agency, really conduct a deep assessment of your program. Make sure you're collecting data about what happens when you put out contracts that don't have goals. Almost nobody will have this, so start. Make sure you're setting goals in a way that's defensible. It can't be that kind of feels like, or we like 30%, we're gonna slap that in every contract. Do you have a realistic and workable good faith efforts process? Or are prime contractors gonna go to federal court and say, yeah, they got good faith efforts, but they never give them and we won't take the risk because we know that we gotta meet the goals. That's a quota system, the courts will not uphold it. Make sure you're collecting adequate data. Focus on industries and types of contracts where you don't see MWBEs participating. We do a lot of work for state DOTs. I mean, transportation is really my sweet spot. And sad to say that for most state DOTs, we do not find DBEs getting any work in heavy civil construction. For those of you that know NAICS codes, that's 237-310, that'll be 60-70% of a state DOT spending, and there are no DBEs getting any of it. Well, that suggests that we need to be rethinking things and get some performance metrics other than meeting goals. One of the things I think we are going to have to change, this is a serious pivot moment for all these programs now, is we have always pointed our fingers at prime contractors like Sundt, like Hensel Phelps, like McCarthy, like all of them, and said, you do something differently. That's not going to work anymore. Agencies and firms are going to have to behave differently if we want to continue to at least maintain the gains we made, let alone go forward. So we can't just say, oh, prime contractors, you go fix it, you go get DBEs, you meet goals. So there's some other things agencies need to think about. Enhancing your race-neutral approaches. Small business programs may be where we all end up. Now, I gotta be honest, small business programs are not a substitute, really, for targeted, as the young lady from Sundt was saying, intentional inclusion. But it might be all we're gonna have. What about technical assistance and supportive services and capacity building initiatives? And I think beyond training videos, that's all fine. But how are we gonna get firms bonded? How are we gonna get them to grow? Where are their lines of credit? Hopefully National Bank of Arizona, this is a lovely facility, thank you to whoever's here for hosting this. But how do we then move that needle forward so people can get the working capital that they need to run their business? Availability analysis, I'm happy to talk about that with anybody from an agency that wants to. Title VI, everybody forgot about Title VI. Everybody knows Title VII, right? That's employment. Well, that means there has to be 1 through 6, right? And Title VI is a non-discrimination provision in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That is not going to get repealed. So we may be looking at that a lot more. If you can do it under state law, get an SBE program. And importantly, and this conference fits into this last bullet, educate the minority and women contracting community about what's going on and help people to be ready. Because what are you going to do if there are no more goals and there can be no more targeted race and gender specific inclusion? Certainly advising people, no new disparity studies right now, and that is really saying something coming from me. Because I have made the majority of my living for the last 25 years doing disparity studies. So I have this, I even put it in a Word doc, so I have to keep retyping it. When I keep getting these RFPs for studies, dear agency, thank you very much. Let me explain to you why we're not gonna propose and why I think you may be wasting your money right now. I would much rather people spend their money on capacity building programs to help minority women firms grow and thrive than on a disparity study, which is nothing but a piece of research. I like it, it's my job, I think it's fun, great. But that doesn't actually help anybody do anything. It's only a tool and a basis to go out and do something else. So I just don't see spending the money right now. So turning for a second to what can the MWDBEs do? Educate yourselves, stay abreast of what's going on. Strengthen your relationships with larger firms. I know DBEs, let's be honest, and I've interviewed probably at least 2,000 people in my career who sort of sit back and go, well, they gotta call me. Maybe they won't have to. And what are you going to do? Making sure, what is your value proposition? Why are you there? If it's just to meet a goal, I predict eventually that's going to be a business problem for you. Prepare for truly open markets. What are you going to do if there are no goals? Focusing on prime contracting opportunities, if that's something you can do. You're an MEP firm, I get it. That's not something you're going to be doing. But for many of you, you are stuck in the subcontracting role. So how do we get you to become primes? What do we need to do to help support you? And organize, keep the pressure on agencies and prime firms. If you're a large firm, a larger contractor, I really suggest you review your in-house efforts now. How good is your outreach? Nobody's going to outlaw that. You can certainly always reach out to firms and let them know. Are you in fact sending notices and requests in time for people to actually do them? Be honest with yourselves. This is a time for self-assessment. If you have a pre-qualification process, take a look at that. Is that actually something you need? Is it more restrictive than it needs to be? Can you help people through it? What about mentor-protege relationships? Certainly think about those. Do you have sufficient staff resources? When I get a new client, I have two questions in this order. The very first one is, how many people do you have working on these issues? If you tell me it's one or two, I know you're not serious. And the second question is, what's your net paid time? If you tell me it's more than 45 days, we don't even talk about your program. We can talk about getting these people paid. I just talked to a black contractor in Chicago who is filing bankruptcy. He got to me through the bankruptcy lawyer because the city of Chicago does not pay on time. So who cares about the program? People can't get paid. Take a look at your documents. This is the time for really looking carefully. Measure your outcomes. Assure you are complying with Title VI if you do government work. And I know we're getting short on time, and I want to make sure I've got plenty of time for questions. And train your staff. So that's the end of that very depressing and discouraging conversation. And I know it's early in the morning. There are two worst times to do this talk. First thing in the morning and right after lunch. So, questions? You all look kind of stunned. No? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Colette. It's Amanda McGinnis.
Yes, yes, hi there. I can see you now. Yes, okay.
We're really for agency. So you said a narrative is expensive. I think you talk about.
Yeah,
A narrative you said is expensive.
it can be.
Explain that to me when it comes to someone having to fill that out.
Yeah.
Not just a one page or a?
No, it's not a one page. You can actually go onto sba.gov and go to the 8A program and you kind of click through. If you can't find it, Amanda knows how to find me. I'm happy to send it to you. But they now have this long checklist of things that you're supposed to tell everybody about. My advice to people, honestly, is to, if you can afford it, get a lawyer to look at it, which is not me, by the way, okay? But I would at least run that by somebody. I'm not sure that that's even gonna cut it eventually, Amanda. And one of the things I'm deeply concerned about is that this individualized approach, that the certifying agencies will collapse under the weight of that. Because now, what are they gonna do? They're gonna have to review these extensive narratives from everybody and make judgment calls. Is this close enough? There'll be appeals. I don't see that there are the institutional resources available to deal with this approach. And some judge might think, oh, that's no big deal, but you know what a pain in the patootie it is to get certified as it is now. What happens when people are gonna have to write their life story out? I think it's gonna be very, very difficult. And the agencies, as I say, are not remotely prepared for an onslaught of all these individualized narratives to be considered, and then when they don't, you say no, then the appeals happen. USDOT has 2 people that work on DBE appeals at headquarters, which is where they eventually go if you've ever been involved in one. And they are terrified because they know they will not be able to handle it. So in some ways, one of the things that's so frustrating about this is that we have judges who don't understand anything about how this stuff really works. And they're coming up with these ideas that have no relationship to reality. Now, that's the best take, that they just don't get it. The worst take is, yeah, they get it. They're not gonna outlaw the programs altogether, they're just gonna make them impossible to administer. Well, you can do it if you meet these tests. Of course, nobody can meet them, but we didn't say that we can't have affirmative action or inclusion. We're just saying you have to meet a bar that nobody can get over. And I sad to say, I'm really, really concerned about this. And if I sound flippant or, I don't know, whatever, some word like that, about this, I am not. I am watching my life's work disintegrate in front of my face. So this is deeply personal to me. I spent my whole career trying to build up these programs and help minority women contractors. And to see these kinds of attacks at this point is just, discouraging doesn't begin to describe it. I'm not a person who cries, really. I mean, I've been accused of just, I'm one of those bottled up lawyers who's like, oh, whatever. But I read that opinion and I cried. Because I just thought, this is really a disaster. This is a disaster. And it's going to be a disaster for these programs. So the question, I think, is what can we all do to get ready? Because it's going to be a sea change in what happens here. Now, in a really particularly interesting lawsuit that I didn't really put in, I didn't think I had time to talk about it, but apparently I think I do, was against Target. Target, circle. And it was brought under the 1934 Securities Exchange Act, where the argument was that Target's Pride Week and DEI efforts, remember they got attacked about, rainbow-colored cupcakes and other nonsense that people were all hysterical about, that caused the value of the stock to drop. And therefore, the board of directors and the C-suite people were in breach of their fiduciary duties to the shareholders by engaging in DEI efforts because they tanked the stock. So that's a neat little trick if you can do it. You boycott, so the stock goes down, and then you say, well, you can't do anything because the stock went down. So we'll see what happens with these two, and that's what I'm talking about. It's a different group of lawyers thinking about these issues very differently than in the past. Now, American Express got sued over its DEI efforts. That one actually ended up having to go to arbitration. So that went to arbitration, so that doesn't make any real law for anybody. But if this is it's a push, really, it's coming from all these different directions to attack these programs. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, so far, with one exception, it's all about race. It's not gender. So we might end up in what I think is a truly bizarre position of having a program for white women and nobody else. I'm not sure politically that's tenable. I know where I come from in South Texas, that is not gonna work. But even in Texas, the state of crazy, although Arizona, you adjacent. I went to Florida last week to do a talk, and I said, it's the only place I can come in the country to talk trash about somebody else. Because Texas is just, and do you know that Texas is actually majority Latino? People know that? You couldn't tell from the way the legislature behaves because we're so gerrymandered. But Texas passed legislation in the last session that eliminated DEI programs in higher education. But it only went to race. Now, most DEI programs are all bundled up, right? I mean, there's not a DEI program. The DEI programs. Now, these kind of programs, which are really civil rights programs, they are designed to address discrimination, which is a different concept than inclusion. But they said it's only race, but they got rid of their DEI staff. So like Texas A&M, half those people are gone already. Higher ed, those people are being fired. So DEI will be dead in Texas next session. One good thing is the Texas legislature only meets every other year. So we have a special session coming up to make sure that we can spend tax dollars with private schools for vouchers. But that's all they can talk about. So they can't get back to us for another year and a half. But it's coming. Florida did the same thing. I don't know if people know that Arkansas outlawed affirmative action last year altogether. Yeah, Sarah.
Sarah Huckabee.
I have some not very polite names for her, which you can think about what those might be. But the apple falls right at the base of the tree. So, folks, I don't know what to say except that we've got to get ready. And if you are a business owner, and that's who I'm concerned about. I spent my life trying to help minority women businesses to grow, to be an economic engine. If that's who you are in this room, figure out what your business strategy is going to be. Be intentional. You have some time. It's not next year, but it's not 5 years from now either.
I'm Ken Blaine.
Oh, hey.
Good to see you again. Good to see you again. And I just want to say thank you for all your work and your service and what you do. And every time that I hear you, I learn something new and try to approach things differently. Having said that, I have two questions. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to them really quickly, but one of which is, are there going to be more different types of requirements for those certifications, or if they're going to go away instantly, or I'm not sure at this point. And second, as a GC, or as GCs, how can we get better prepared to be prepared for this onslaught of different types of things that are happening? Because as McCarthy building companies, we have a 20% participation goal on each and every project. Mm-hmm. So we want to be prepared for things like this as part of our culture to be inclusive.
Mm-hmm. No, I think those are two really good questions. On the certification issue, I think we're just going to have to see how it plays out and what it is, assuming that the programs stand, right? If there's no program, there's no reason anybody to go get certified, that's going to be gone. But assuming we'll have it for a while, it's certainly possible that it will become much more difficult to get certified, which is going to shrink your pool. So you need to be prepared for that. In terms of what I think the GCs really can do, it is about strengthening relationships with these firms that are MWDBs. And I'm actually going to kind of stay away from the term diverse because, again, I'm a lawyer and I live in that world. And there it's not diversity. it's race. It's very specific issues. It's not sort of a general idea that we want everybody to feel like they can belong. And that's not what we're dealing with in this world. And that's one point out, if you don't take anything else away, I think that's really important, because we live in a DEI world, but these programs are not DEI programs. I would never call the U.S. Department of Transportation's DBE program a DEI program. It's not what it is. It's a remedial program to address structural inequities on the basis of race and gender, which is a different kind of focus. So I think what you can do is thinking about, how do we have our own really solid mentor-protege program? Now, Arizona DOT might not give you any credit for it, or Valley, or some of the other folks, but what can you do to really have a relationship with these firms? You might think of that. I have one client that's in the process of doing this, so talk to me next year and I can tell you how well it turned out. But they are actually surveying themselves, because you do surveying, like, it's easy to do it now. The MWDPEs that they have done business with, and ask them about their experiences doing business with them. Will be helpful. We pay on time. What else can we do to help you? I mean, I think part of what we've done is people who, either like me, put together programs and defended programs, or even administrators, is we've kind of talked at minority women firms. I don't think we talked enough with them. What do you need? What's really going to help you? So hopefully that helps.
This will be our last question.
Good morning, Colette. Gary Flynn with Valley Metro. I wanted to inquire about, do you know of any organizations, groups collaborating, businesses collaborating to fight the erasing of these programs in history? Do you know of any groups that's pulling together those resources to challenge the system?
Well, yes, some. I know that Reverend L. Sharpton's Action Network? I can't remember the name of that. Yeah, exactly. I know that they've been trying to pull some people together. I've been talking with them. I got an email from NMSCC, the National Minority Supplier Development Council, about advocacy and whatnot. So I think people are starting to pay more attention to it. But the problem is the courts. And they don't care about that. They don't care. Do you think Justice Roberts cares about your advocacy? He does not. And we know Justice Alito doesn't, and we won't even talk about Brother Clarence. If you ever catch me at night at the bar somewhere, so here's my pitch to come to ACCA, the American Contract Compliance Association Conference in Seattle next year, I will tell you my Clarence Thomas stories, because Clarence was at Yale when I was there. Okay, that is going back to the 70s, people. All right, so I got some stories. But anyway, I think that's the problem, Gary, which is, yes, we want to organize, we want to do what we can, we want to pressure Congress, we want to pressure your agencies. But I think the question is, pressure them to do what? And really making sure that there are the structural resources to be able to deliver services, I think, is the key. There are some really good supportive services programs out here. I don't do them, but if people are interested, I'm always happy to pass on the names of the good folk that I know that do it. If you're taking 2 months to process checks, maybe we need 2 more people in the controller's office. Now that's not sexy and it's not directly related to the program, but where are the pain points for smaller firms to do work for you? If you tell me we want to unbundle contracts, and I was kind of on apple pie about this, unbundle contracts. Well, unbundling takes work. It takes people. It takes a lot more people to manage 10 contracts than 1, which is why the contracting officers want them all in one package. That's staff. So maybe that's part of what conversation we need to have is organize to do what? To get what resources? Because I personally think it is a waste of time to go picket Stephen Miller's house. Now, people are doing that, by the way. I mean, remember him? It was like Casper the Friendly Ghost, except he's not so friendly. So anyway, that's my best thought. But yes, there are some. Email me. I got the same email for 25 years, and I can put you in touch with some people. Is that? It's 9:26, and so I think we have run out of our time.
You were great. I don't think you scared anybody. So now we're going to have our panel, but I am going to introduce this fantastic individual who will be facilitating that panel. Patty Tellez. She has been in the public works industry in Arizona for over 22 years, and most of that time has been spent even through her own company, Nichol Corporation. Patty has helped agencies, developers, and contractors meet goals for diverse subcontracting, paying local prevailing wages, and attracting a skilled workforce. Patty is extremely well versed in the different nuances of federal economic development programs, especially those from the Departments of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. Patty, thank you so much for being a part of this conference and facilitating this panel. Give her another hand as she comes up.
And I, for one, am not scared by what you talked about. Because in Arizona, we were sued a long time ago. So I think one of the reasons for this panel, the power of this panel, is demonstrating what is happening here in Arizona, given the situation that this isn't new. So I'm very excited to be the moderator of today's panel. Last year, we did talk about Holt. We had a federal representative, we had city representatives, we talked about their programs, how they came about, and we talked about goals and how that works out, and politically what has to happen. This time we're diving in. So it's a little bit more of a in-depth conversation with the specific owners and agencies that are implementing these programs. So I'm very glad to bring them on stage. I do have a missing speaker. So she made it? Great. I was trying to delay just a little bit, but I'm going to ask Nichol Luoma from ASU to come on board, and I'll introduce her in a moment. Jonathan Thatcher is also in the back there from Valley Metro. Please join us on stage. And Christine, I'm glad that you made it. Ms. Christine Mackay, Director of City of Phoenix Economic Development. So I want to tell you a little bit about this panel, because we don't want to go the normal route of agencies that have formalized programs, maybe are only implementing goals, because we knew that the situation was changing. And after we heard what's going on on a national level, on the federal level, I wanted to give you some examples and tools, conversations about what that looks like in a variety of places. Because here in Arizona, the rules change, we do things differently than maybe in some other locations, but we always figure out the solution to get through it. And all of you in this audience are solutions finders. So I don't think that, although it was a bit stinky to show you a skunk at breakfast, it's just new challenging scenario for us, and one that we're very familiar with. But it's important that you understand what's happening on a national level, because you may come into Phoenix or be new in your positions, and you maybe just not distinguishing, for example, the impact of discrimination law and your DE&I efforts, right? The difference is there. So that's why it's very important that you're here today, and thank you for being a part of this. So let me tell you a little bit about my panel. You met Colette, and thank you for coming to Arizona. We always love to have you here, and I'm just always excited to hear what you've got going on. But next to her, we've got Nichol Luoma, Vice President of University Business Services at Arizona State University. Ms. Luoma is Chief Procurement Officer, responsible for over $1 billion in spend at ASU. From her, we'll talk about ASU's culture of innovation and inclusion and how that permeates through its business operations. At the end, we have Christine Mackay, Director of Community and Economic Development at the City of Phoenix. She has the unique job of attracting jobs and businesses here to Arizona, and some of that culture that needs to be here to support that attraction is part of what she's going out there and selling to new employers. The things that we build, she brings in. So thank you for being here. Her work not only attracts the plants and facilities that are built by our industry, but also the jobs that fill them. So it's a very unique perspective on how she goes about attracting those and what's in those agreements. And then Jonathan Thatcher, Director of Procurement at Valley Metro. Now, Valley Metro is a recipient of federal funds and operates in that race and neutral gender environment, right? So Jonathan is going to bring it back down to us on what he can do, or what the agency can do in a situation like that. So he's been with the Regional Public Transportation Agency. They are the ones that build not just light rail. I know we're on several light rail projects, but also streetcar. They handle the transit. They're the paratransit services, and they receive monies from a lot of different places and have oversight from a lot of different public agencies. So that's an additional hurdle there. And then Ms. Colette Holt, I appreciate you being here after that update. I think your perspective on clarifying some of the nuances between what we're hearing on a national level, what's being challenged in courts, and maybe what's happening here locally will help us get through this conversation. So I'm going to ask each of you, actually, start with Nichol first. You were selected, and I introduced some of the comments and why you were selected on this panel. But your organization prioritizes diversity and inclusion in a different way, maybe than a public agency that's receiving federal funds. You're the new American University, ASU. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yes, good morning. So raise your hand if you are an ASU grad or you love an ASU grad. Okay.
Go Devils.
Go Devils. And I don't want to hear from U of A. So ASU.
Where I went to school, by the way.
No, we love our Arizona schools. I'm just kidding. So how many of you are familiar with Dr. President Michael Crow? Okay. Amazing transformation for ASU. I'm a December 2000 graduate. I was outstanding senior, first gen graduate, by the way. And when I graduated, if you look at the demographics of what graduated, people looked like me, and maybe weren't representative of the state of Arizona. And I'm going to read you our charter. So the charter is something that we have literally etched in stone across every single campus. ASU is a comprehensive public research university measured not by whom it excludes. We accept and this is my notation, we accept everybody that's qualified, but whom it includes and how they succeed, advancing research and discovery of public value, and assuming fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and overall health of the communities it serves. So overall, the charter is embedded in everything we do. We have some interesting laws in Arizona for state money, right? But we are committed to, like we've done with our student demographics, doing very similar things with our supplier demographics. So we need to talk more about that, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
Why don't you hand the mic over? Oh, actually, everybody's mic'd up. You want to tell us a little bit about you at Valley Metro, Jonathan?
Well, after listening to Colette, no, I don't want to say a word. Because I don't want to be the agency that's. So at Valley Metro, it's rather interesting because about a year and a half ago, Valley Metro got a new CEO by the name of Jessica Miller. So we actually have female, obviously she can't own the business since it's Valley Metro, but it brings a new complexion into the organization. And so right now, Valley Metro is implementing a comprehensive DEI initiative and is also working it into its strategic planning process with the boards of directors that we have. We also approach it from a perspective of purposeful planning with regard to our race and gender neutral program. And we are under a race and gender neutral policy. So we have been somewhat hindered by the ability to set DBE goals, but have established an internal working group focused on increasing DBE utilization on our federal aid projects, but also more broadly on our supplier diversity, generally on our non-federally sponsored projects as well. We focus on trying to help identify opportunities where things like small dollar purchases and pushing out more information about future projects that are coming, procurements that are coming, because we open our procurement one day and you have 45 days to respond. If you wait to get DBE certified until you see that procurement a week or 2 weeks into its cycle, you'll never get certified and be able to hook up with a prime and get a part of their bid. Those are all activities that need to happen well before one of our solicitations hits the street. And then the other and sort of fourth component is we took a look at our technology infrastructure because we want to measure the success that we're having with this. And certainly under FTA dollars and federal dollars, we have DBE funding DBE, not requirements, but we have DBE funding attached to those projects. But we look more broadly with our ERP system or Enterprise Resource Planning system how we could put in there all of our supplier base and understand not just DBE, but women-owned, minority-owned, the entire scope of where we're spending dollars and how can we engage in those communities. Because if we can't measure it, we can't improve upon it. We don't, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you're starting from. So we've also implemented technology both in our ERP system, but then also with our the direction we're going with our procurement software as well, so that we can market more directly to DBE suppliers.
I'm glad to hear that. Very glad to hear that. I received the solicitations and you can see maybe some gaps in information. So I'm very glad to hear the improvements that are happening technology-wise. Now, Christine, your situation is a little different. I mean, you're one in your economic development efforts. It's not necessarily mandated by a funding source or written into the program, but you're connecting other businesses that have a culture with our community here and trying to match those. So how does diversity, equity, and inclusion, that cultural competency, how does that fit into your work?
You're right, we're not mandated by anything specific as economic development, but we work really closely with a lot of companies. So our goal is to bring new development into Phoenix, bring new jobs into Phoenix, help our existing companies grow and thrive, and make sure that all of our citizens have access to a good quality job. All of our citizens have access to a good quality job. So in our role, what we often will do is our companies that are coming in, a lot of them are really socially conscious. They're very thoughtful about their own measures and metrics and programs that they have within their organizations. And so they want to be connected to like-minded architects and contractors and others, on project managers on site that have the same kind of mantra and philosophy that these companies have. So we can often use that as a resource to make connection to companies that are here in Phoenix, and we do. If my attorney was in this room right now, he would crawl under the table when I say we make recommendations of companies, but I do it on a daily basis.
Thank you for that. And I'm noticing your remarks on this because I told you Arizona was a little different. And one of the questions that I had for you was, you travel all over the country, and the way that these programs are implemented, even between geographies or political subsegments, are all very different, and they have different rules and funding. But I'm hearing you, kind of learn from what's happening here in Arizona. How have you seen this work elsewhere? And as you move west, who's been sued a lot, as you move west, what do you think of programs like these?
Well, Christine, that's really interesting. I hadn't ever thought about that idea about how do we make sure that the economic development people are hooking up the companies that want to come with minority and women architects, engineers, designers, whatever, construction companies. So I'm gonna steal that. I'll give you credit when I'm talking to other cities about that, because I've never heard anybody say that before. So that's why I'm like vibrating up here, because I think that's really, really interesting. I think it's all basically, to go back to Patty's point about how does it look different around the country. Frankly, it's about political power, mostly. The city of Chicago, for example, has had a minority women business program since Harold Washington was mayor, and he died in 1987. And we've had very high goals and very high utilization, because that's the political power of Black and Latinos in Chicago. You aren't going to stay mayor if you can't figure out a way to get city dollars spread around. As my grandma said, is there enough jam for everybody's biscuits? So that's, I think, a big part of it. I have to be honest, I'm a little startled to hear that Valley Metro runs a race-neutral program. It's not like you don't have minority folk here. So I'm a little surprised about that. But I think that's the main thing, really, Patty, is about political power and organizing. I think the other thing, though, is that those of us who have mostly worked in communities where they have had very strong race and gender-based programs really need to learn from the folks that have been doing race neutral all this time. So I was one of those people that poo-pooed race neutral, because I'm like, the problem is race. So why are we being neutral about the problem? But I think we've got to learn from the folks that have been doing it like that, what's really worked for you, how do you make sure that people don't fall out of the contracting pool, when you don't have the ability to set contract goals. So I think we're gonna look west, as opposed to the west has always looked east, about how to do it.
Oh, I alert my team, when we head east, I said the language, the definitions are gonna be different.
Oh, yeah.
The expectations are gonna be different, and there are some assumptions that may be built into the culture of these kind of programs as we head east. As we head west, it's about business opportunity, it's about lining up the right businesses to work with one another, whomever is owning it, it's about jobs. I'm very excited to hear about the things that we stand for in a company, that economic, that social, that cultural impact. That's what we're talking about here with these organizations. It's built into your charter, etched in stone, and a part of your excellence program at ASU. I want to talk a little bit more about that because your spirit of excellence and innovation at ASU is one of those things that attracts growth to Phoenix. And as we're attracting businesses to Arizona, I want to know how diversity plays a part of that. I mean, are you as connected as Christine is, or how does that work out when you're making opportunities happen at ASU?
Yeah, so we've been very intentional. A few years back, we did a full audit and review of where we were with supplier diversity, and we came up with a new vision statement. And we're committed to the ongoing development and growth of diverse and small business purchasing program. Small business is important because the state actually does care about small business, and it's actually in our procurement code. Through fostering an environment that promotes inclusion, the Small Business and Supplier Diversity Program will ensure that diverse and small business will be given maximum opportunity to compete. What that means for us is that we have a supplier leadership program where small and diverse businesses are welcome to attend. We talk about how to do business with ASU. We talk about how to work with bigger general contractors. When you look at the scale of ASU, and we are now over $2 billion last year in spend, so we've gone up quite a bit. We do have a need for that economic fiduciary responsibility. A lot of times there are big companies that come in, but we look at what are they doing? What are their practices? I'm also sustainability operations officer. And as we look at our resiliency and supply chain, right? Being reliant on one partner or not having your supplier base thinking innovatively with diverse mindsets around the table, thinking about what customers want is actually a problem. So we have these continued conversations with these big companies we're working with, and we highlight our successes with our small local businesses as well, which happen to be, a lot of them are diverse or women-owned businesses, right? So we're very intentional about leveraging our place, having those conversations, tying it to our charter, and we hope at some point for our supplier base to be as representative as our students are.
Thank you for that. No, I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the leadership you're taking on that effort as a campus across the board. You're such a big economic presence in Arizona now, across the state, not just in the valley. I saw an article, I guess not an article, but an interview, Christine, between you and Councilman, and you were talking about that as you attract businesses into the state, and especially businesses that may be international, they're looking for services that can relate to their employees. I think the example was, you need a doctor that speaks your language, and maybe a doctor that looks like you. How does that supply chain look like, and what's important for attracting those businesses? What are you saying to them about Phoenix that maybe we all can resonate as we talk about why it's important? What is that important statement?
So when we market Arizona, we market Phoenix, and specifically, we really go in with, and everybody laughs when I say it, but it's true, it's this Wild West mentality. We're a culture that's built on innovation, it's built on connectiveness, it's built on the ability to work together. And it really comes from the fact that we built a city in a place where a city probably shouldn't have been built. We had one river that flowed through, the Hohokam Indians were here before us. They had built canals that moved into downtown Phoenix so that they could get crops growing around their village and be away from the water so they didn't flood. And when a guy named Jack Swillings came in as one of the early stage pioneers into Phoenix, he saw these canals and figured out how to build canals throughout the system and founded a little company called Salt River Project. And so that created the canal system that started being able to make Phoenix livable. So without that innovation, without that connectedness, without that ability to working with culture, the city wouldn't even be here. So as we look at today, there isn't anybody that I can't call if I've got a company that's here doing a similar business or comes from a similar background or something. Everybody is open, everybody's connected. It's not like on the East Coast where if your granddad's not part of Patriots 435 and your dad didn't go to BS 283, you can't get involved in the community. That's not Phoenix. Phoenix is this open, diverse, easy place to do business. And so as an example that you use, we recruit companies from all over the world, whether it's Mexico, whether it's Asia, whether it's Canada, whether it's Europe, wherever we're recruiting those companies for. And a lot of the countries are much easier because English is their primary language. So it's much easier to recruit people, and you can stock up an international aisle in your grocery store and everybody's good. But when we're recruiting companies from Mexico and from Asia and from areas in Africa, that English isn't their primary language. And when they come into a community and they speak English, they can do business like you and I do. But when you're sick, you want to do business in your own language. You want to talk to a doctor so you can explain what's going on. So what we've done is we've cataloged all the doctors that are with our hospitals that that they're fluent in other languages. And then we've got a list of those, and they've been very thoughtful to provide, and I don't give them out to other people, to provide us their cell phones. So if something goes wrong, we can easily make connections for the individuals that are here speaking in their own language. And so much of that comes from our Phoenix Sister Cities program. So Phoenix Sister Cities, we have 11 sister cities. And when we were recruiting a company called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, out of Taiwan a few years ago, one of the concerns was as they were sending in their teams to investigate the market to really see what was the vibration, what was the air quality, what was, these chips that they manufacture are much more sensitive than you and I are. And so they needed to come in and do some testing. And one of their concerns was height of COVID, what happens if somebody gets sick? So we worked through our Taipei Sister Cities Committee. They put together an entire plethora of resources that these individuals could call if something happened in the night, where restaurants were, where grocery stores, things that made them feel more comfortable. And then as soon as we landed TSMC, we went after because now we've got more than 40 companies that have also come from Taiwan, that we've landed a full slate of restaurants that are going in around in grocery stores, so you can shop. So if you go to the Chandler Costco right now, or the Chandler 99 Ranch, the difference between 6 months ago and today, I go to 99 Ranch because they have my husband's favorite almond cookies, and my husband has an Asian background, and so I go there to get his almond cookies. I thought you had to wait in line like 15 minutes last Saturday because the grocery store is now packed with these individuals who makes them feel very comfortable that that's the food they're used to, that's the process they're used to, that's the individuals that make them feel very comfortable. And the Chandler Costco too has an entire international section. That's all moving up north, and so they're under construction right now up in North Phoenix to be able to provide those same services. But I would argue that that's part of the service for economic development. If you, as my mom used to say, if you have 3 smarts in your head, you'll figure this out, is making those individuals feel really comfortable. Activity breeds activity, and that draws more companies here, that draws more activity. When I started with Phoenix in 2014, I was Chandler's economic developer for 17 years. About 2% of our book of business was international. Today, it's more than 35% of our book of business is internationally based companies.
Thank you. The timing couldn't be any more perfect. One, I need to shout out to my husband because he is correct. Apparently, every Costco has different stuff. So we have to go into every one. Now we know. It's official. So every Costco has a different product. But we talk about that this city evolves and solves problems. We are in a unique situation to use cultural and background in race, gender, ethnicity, how we connect with one another as a competitive advantage in business. And so I think that's one of those things that as we get ready as business owners, whether you're prime or sub, that competitive advantage piece, how do you connect with your client? How do you connect with the community they serve? That's important to talk about here. I was just recently at a training session. We were talking about communication and ESL. The default is that ESL, English as a second language in Arizona, is Spanish. And they said, no, we had translators from, speaking a variety of dialects over at TSMC. and what that looked like. So we're just adapting here to the marketplace and what that looks like, because the nice thing about Arizona is you tend to be business first, right? I mean, we're business first, and for small businesses, we always said that you're business first and you're DPE second, later. It's just a qualifications base. You're a business first, and then a community member, and those things, and some of the things that you're doing. So very glad to hear how that is playing out. I'm gonna ask, and I'm kind of letting you lie low, because it is a tough situation that you're in. Operating a race and gender neutral program, receiving a lot of money, but you hear what's being committed and promised out there and where that leadership is. And I think that's where Valley Metro is right now with this programs. You have that leadership speak, that what do you want to see internally without having to be on paper mandated, this is what we're going to do. How does that flow down to you? And then how do you make that flow down into your staff and your processes?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to outreach, doing events like this as broadly as we can. We're also engaging shortly in a survey out to the DBE and small business community to try and figure out what are the barriers for engaging with us that we can maybe address. Because I will tell you, I get it, our solicitations are 300 to 1,000 pages long. And these are, and can be very Byzantine in terms of engaging with them. And we always have to look at it because we are, we have a public trust issue with spending tax dollars. And so we have to be assured of preparedness. We want diversity in responses, inclusion of craft, which means you're ready for prime time, you're thinking outside the norm, maybe bringing something new and innovative to the conversation. And then actively look at collaborations or joint ventures. Maybe you're really good at one piece of it, but then put together the group that brings that particular response or offer, to be something really unique. One thing that I will, and I hate to, I'm scared to point this out, but as a public, don't overwhelm me after I say this. But as a public agency, everything we do is subject to the Arizona Public Records Act. That means all of the proposals we receive, all of the pricing we receive, unless it's a patented item or cybersecurity and it's protected under NDA or something like that, all of our documents, everything that we receive from your competitors become public information and available to you through the Public Records Act. And that also means our internal evaluations. How did the firms get scored? What were the comments that the evaluators made? And I will tell you that what happens is the large sophisticated firms, after every one of our large, we just finished East Valley bus operations, which was about $1.2 billion over 10 years. Every single large company that bid on that didn't get the award has already submitted a public records request for our procurement file to see all their competitors' proposals and pricing and what the evaluator said, so that they can take their proposal and elevate that to score better next time, so that they can see their competitors' pricing and down to the level of detail that was submitted to us. They can see how the evaluators at Valley Metro looked at it. And the large companies, these are form emails that we receive. They do this after every single bid that they go after, every pursuit, whether they're successful or not. They come in and ask for a public records disclosure on that procurement file, and we have to provide that to them. And that can provide a wealth of information. You can see how, when we go in to evaluate proposals, and this is one thing that I do try and point out, is we lay out evaluation criteria and we assign points to it. And if you want to make it easier on the evaluators, just take the evaluation criteria and respond to the criteria as it's laid out clearly with titles, headings, subheadings. Here's my response to this criteria. And you will do better on scoring, because if we have to hunt through a 150-page proposal and find it in 3 different places where you met that criteria, because that's your standard proposal, that's not necessarily going to score as well, because you have to think of it. We approach this purposefully from this is the criteria, this is where it exists in the requirements, or that this is the criteria we're asking about, this is where it exists in the requirements, this is what we expect to receive from offerors, and this is what we think would be something that would exceed the requirement that an offeror could submit to us. So we do this planning in the background. And that's how, when we go into evaluate proposals, that's how the scoring works. And so, it's one thing that I absolutely recommend to folks is you get access to competitor pricing, you get access to how they're presenting themselves in front of the agencies and the folks that have the solicitations published, and can just provide a wealth of guidance. And you don't have to come up with this stuff all on your own. You can see, oh, that's a great way to present that particular item. We never thought about that. Or, hey, we have those same programs around employee retention. The requirement just said we have to have staffing, so we gave you our staffing. But you didn't tell me about all the good things you do for employees to retain them, to incent them, to give us that additional information. The requirement may be just for staffing, but it's when you go beyond the requirement and give us more information to consider that you can possibly get into that exceeds category.
Thank you for that, because you're right, the points are laid out and you can meet the points, but if an organization is looking at this, it's a priority, it's, politically or the leadership or whatever, that additional excellence, if you will, point that out and it makes you a better fit. We're talking about good fits, right, between the need and the solution. I'm gonna team you up, Colette, because I'm gonna ask you this question specifically. I know your history has been disparity studies and you do all the data. And I just lost it, right? We talk about programs like this and how do we get in. In 20 years, I'll run into businesses that will say, well, you never used me for this, or I'm never included in this, or why am I going to participate? And I ask those businesses, I was like, so are you not working? And usually the answer is no, especially if you're in Arizona. We have very few idle companies. If you've got idle staff, let somebody know, because everybody needs people. So we've got very few idle resources in terms of our supplier base. So if it's never at Valley Metro, or never at City of Phoenix, or never with, it's not a matter of not wanting, but maybe it's not the right attraction, right? They're not attracted to that project or that owner or that prime contractor. It's not a good fit. Contractually might be an issue, payment terms might be an issue, but you've dealt with businesses all over the place and identify what those hurdles are for our subcontractors, our supplier base. What are consistently across the board hurdles for small business participation, minority business participation, women business participation in this sector?
Well, yeah, it's actually sort of remarkably consistent. To your point about the RFPs, people don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. So one of the things I would love to see in supportive services is some help with that. And that's what I'm saying, don't waste your money on studies right now. Go give people the services they need. So here's what people seem to lack. First thing is money. Money, money, money. So getting good financing programs in place is just key. I always sort of chuckle when you hear from people, oh, we've got a loan program in there, you can get up to $50,000, and I'm just rolling my eyes, I'm like, where's that take? That's not going to take you anyplace. So you need really good financing programs. And they need to be, if you're in construction, it's particularly difficult, because let's be honest, construction is a super high-risk business, and banks don't want to lend construction companies money. They don't want to lend McCarthy money. So they damn sure don't want to lend it to you. Okay, so that is a real problem. There are some good linked deposit programs out there. That is something I've been trying to push for 20 years, is if you are a depository institution for an agency, let's call it Valley Metro, and if I have a prime contract with Valley Metro, that contract becomes assignable. Because here's where we go back to the procurement people, which is so much of what's built in is anti-small business. It's just built into the system. So for example, most government contracts are not assignable. Well, that means the bank can't take a first order security interest in the contract. Think about that. If you've got a contract with Valley Metro, why can't you assign that contract to the bank so that when Valley Metro pays the bank knows it's gonna get paid? So there are all these sort of structural problems that are built in, and a program doesn't fix that. But the good news is, you don't need a program to fix it. So some of this stuff really is inherent. A couple other things aside from money, is legal and accounting support. Small firms, people sign anything. Back when I was a much younger lawyer and I used to do more work for a small business, they'd call me, well, the bond says I have to do X. I'm like, yeah, you gotta do X, you signed it. And they go, well, I didn't understand what it meant. Too bad, you signed it. So Missouri DOT, technical Missouri went kind of crazy, had lawyers on staff as part of their supportive services program who for a reduced fee would provide legal advice, and these were construction lawyers. I loved that. I thought, well, here's where people really need help. They need help with accounting. Your books are a mess. So if in fact you have to get certified and audit financials, why isn't the supportive services program providing funds to help you do that? So it's these kinds of things. You can go to a million meet and greets and hand out business cards, but that's not going to get you into the relationship. So I really like the mentor protege program when they're good and they work. You mentioned joint ventures. Here's the problem with joint ventures. Well, there are a couple. One is you don't know about the project in time. 45 days, now we've got to go get the lawyers because that's what you have to do. You've got to pay the lawyers for work you don't have yet, by the way, and put something together. So that's one of the first problems. The second problem about joint ventures is how are you going to structure the thing? How much risk? Who's up the money? Who's going to manage the project? I would love to see a supportive services program that gave advice about how to structure joint ventures and helped you with the legal aspects before the projects come out. By the time you got Valley Metro stuff's on the street, it's too late. So those are all the kinds of things I think that help. And as I say, I feel like I'm so depressing and sticky to people. But the good news is that you don't need programs in order to do any of this. What you need is money from the agency and prime contractors to help get people the services they need, which is not a goal. And so when we don't have anything in Arizona, we haven't had goals for a lot of things for a long time. So how is that all working? So that's what I see, Patty, which is it's the nuts and bolts of business that are tripping people up. Especially a lot of contractors or whatnot are very good at the skill that they sell. They're really good at that. But it's the back office business stuff that's killing them.
I can't agree more. Now, we run into that with prime contractors we work with. It's that back office stuff. They're good at the work, they're delivering the work. And like I said, everybody's tapped out. We've got to attract more people into this industry. The later panel's going to talk about workforce, and that's a big deal for us in the industry. But you hit some key points on the business side of construction, so I'm very glad that you brought up the accounting and the legal. But organizations like the AMCA have those in their membership that are here and understand that it's different for companies here, in this construction arena than, for example, your insurance agent. It's kind of like picking your insurance agent. It's not going to cover the work that we do in construction oftentimes. So you have to know the right attorneys, the right services.
Oh, can we talk about bonding? Yeah, or maybe we won't.
No, we don't need to talk
We won't
about
talk
that.
about the owners in the
Another
room,
panel.
the owners in the room know that they're signing that, personally, and that's a very big difference in terms of that negotiating point. So we hope to educate you all that there are, there's leverage before signing. Once you sign,
That's all.
help you. So I've only got a few more minutes, and I thought I would have time for questions, but I want to know, were there any other hurdles that maybe she hasn't covered that you're seeing in your organization?
Yeah, I'll just mention that when you look at where we spend money, right? So there is construction, those are big, big contracts. General contractor, and they sub it out. We do look at spend and who they're spending with, and we have reporting requirements on that. But a lot of our spend is small dollar spend that is decentralized, and this is really important to our departments. And so it doesn't necessarily get approval through central purchasing. And so that means we have to internally educate them on, who is a sustainable business, who is a small, diverse-owned business, because they're the end users making that decision. One of the things that we've done, and one of the challenges that I see in small businesses, is their ability to connect from a technology perspective. Being on an advisory board of other higher education folks on the Amazon Business Advisory Board, there's been some good success where they're connecting small business and they're notating in Amazon Business when that supplier is sustainable or a small diverse-owned business by, state definition or by federal definitions. And that has been helpful. So I think there's still ways that we can connect big business with good infrastructure with our small diverse-owned business that have innovative products and good solutions.
Thank you. Thank you. Christine, I wanted to ask you, because you do operate in this environment, what do you want us as industry to do? What should we be doing to help you be successful at your work? As it relates to culture, diversity, that inclusiveness, what can we do to help you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're working with our companies, when you're brought into projects, don't renegotiate the deal after you've been in the room and you're working with them. Remember these companies we're working with, it's just like others you're talking about, it's their first time doing it too. We do thousands of building permits every single year. This is their first building, or they do this one building, or they do something. So making it really easy on these companies and understanding what's important to them. What I often go into a room with contractors and our companies, and the company tells what's important to them, and the contractor talks about everything except what was important to the company. So I think really listening is a key here to getting business with them and understanding what you're going to deliver. And then I can't emphasize enough communication with the city and communication with the company on where your delays are at, where you're finding challenges, where you have issues, where your work is going. We had a planning meeting right before here on a project for an old warehouse building south of downtown. And we had everyone around the table all at once. We had the architect, we had the contractors, we had the designers, we had our team, we had our inspectors, we had our fire marshal, we had the owner, we had everybody around the table, and we laid out all the problems. The owner said, here's where we have to get to, here's the day I have to be open. And we all worked backwards in a schedule and put it all together. And it's a bigger project. It's not a huge project, but it's a bigger project. But we do that for even the smallest of projects that we're bringing in. If we have an owner who's sensitive, if we have an owner who's time sensitive, if we have an owner who's price sensitive on anything, don't hesitate to call your economic developers. That's what we're here for. We're the conveners. We're the ones who are allowed to go rogue. We're the ones that can come in with 2 minutes to go right before they speak and freak everybody out, because that's what we do. That's where we live at, is pushing people to their limits. But whatever city you're working with, if you've got a project, I urge you to get to know your economic developers in that particular city, in all cities. We'll grab coffee with you, we'll have lunch with you, we'll meet with you quarterly and tell you about projects that we know that are going on. But then in return, you need to educate yourself on Title 34, on the city's building processes, on how the city submittals, and not badmouth the cities that you're out there working with on a constant basis, because we hear about it. And I'm telling you, and I'm usually the one bad-mouthing my team, so we're fighting with the team internally. But if you've got an issue, call the economic developer of the city, because we can probably get it fixed faster than anybody else can for you.
Thank you for that. That's good. This was such a great panel. And now, so everybody put your pen down, because I'm going to ask Jonathan a loaded question here. Goals aside, policies aside, written direction aside, in plain language, what could your vendors, your first-year contractors, your suppliers, what could we do to help you reach your diversity, equity, inclusion measures or elementary?
So a couple things. One is on the design and construction side, with our solicitations, participate in the pre-offer conferences. We have set them up purposely to introduce primes to subs, and in particular DBs within that. We do a whole section on every single one of our pre-offer conferences around DB participation within the project. What would we like to see And we do a meet and greet between the primes and the subcontractors. Within that, it's in person. So we do ask that, please take advantage of that, because the more people that participate in that environment, it is a very direct relationship on a specific project, and that is in the solicitation process. And the primes are looking for DBs to work with in that context. The other thing that I will mention is we are moving to a procurement product called OpenGov. And I highly recommend that that everyone create a profile for your company within OpenGov. It allows you to designate yourself as a minority-owned business, a woman-owned business, a DB. It allows you to put in your certifications and all of what we wonderfully call NIGP codes, which are the goods and services governments buy. It allows you to put in as many NIGP codes that you can service, and then you can subscribe to over 1,600 government agencies, and you'll be notified of solicitations coming up proactively through that system. And you can follow Sundt Valley Metro, you can follow the city of Tucson. The city of Phoenix is coming on board with OpenGov as well right now, the city of Avondale. But you get access to over 1,600 government agencies that are already on the network and using that procurement, that particular procurement tool. So for the first time, you don't have to maintain just the Valley Metro registration, the city of Phoenix registration in SAP and in Oracle Core for us, and all of these diverse areas. You're never going to have time to manage all of those on a regular basis. So that's the other thing that I do. Those are two things that I would suggest are very tangible that you can take advantage of: the pre-offer conferences and then getting registered within, getting a profile within OpenGov.
Thank you. We're about out of time, but I have one rapid fire question I'm just going to go straight down the line with, and it's the measure, right? That metric question. When we convene a year from now, how do we know whether or not we were successful in this effort of diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we know that this works? So if you had that one measure to go, last year I said this, what would it be?
Well, for me, the measure always is the utilization of minority women-owned firms, but also now diversifying that utilization amongst different types of procurement.
Yeah, same. We have to measure what we're actually doing. And I would like to see you all have gone to our website, How to Do Business with ASU, reach out to me if there's something challenging, and be a part of our supplier showcase. So please let me know if you have any questions.
So our measure is that we are meeting or exceeding through DB and diverse supplier participation, the calculated, I have to be careful about the words I use. That's why I read. No, it's on the web. The calculated availability in the region of 15%. And right now I will tell you we are sub 1% participation. So we have a lot of real estate to make up here.
I would say, just to be different than my colleagues, I would say the connections, the additional connections that we've made for your companies to our businesses that are moving in.
Thank you. Thank you all. This is such a different panel. Like I said, it's for you to go and do your work and to understand this from a different perspective. So I appreciate this panel joining us today. Please give them a hand. Give them around here during the break so you can ask your questions directly. I think I have to hand it off to Tracy or, are you Mike now?
I am. Check, 1, 2. Hello. Well, wasn't this an awesome session of gold? Can we call it gold? That was some good, when you get gold nuggets of information. That's what this was. And so now we have heard from this wonderful panel all around some great information concerning our XBE, investing in our communities and the importance of that. So we're going to take a break right now. Tell your neighbor, this is the time where we get to breathe and stretch, but don't go anywhere. Do not go anywhere because you have more gold to get. I don't want you to leave your gold behind. Don't leave it behind. You got a little bit more to get. When we come back, we're going to hear from our keynote speaker, but we're going to also talk about something that everybody in this industry wants to know more about, and that is accelerating the workforce pipeline. So there's more gold to be had, so don't leave it behind. So this is a 15-minute break. Thank you so much, panel. And we'll be right back. So please put your hands together for our Hensel Phelps representative, Rosemary Middleton.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Like Tracy said, I'm Rosemary Middleton. I'm a coordinator of Supplier Diversity for Hensel Phelps Southwest District, and I'm also a board member of the AMCA. Yay! And I'm very proud to work for Hensel Phelps. It sponsors the AMCA throughout the years, the premier sponsor for all of their events. And especially today, we are sponsoring our keynote speaker, Sandra Ichiho. I was influenced by Sandra early in my career at Hensel Phelps, as she was a leader in the Women's Network events that helped women develop their leadership potential at Hensel Phelps. She has been influential and a role model for professionals in Southern California as an operations manager in the past. And we bring her today to tell her story of how her career has gone and implementation of DEI in Hensel Phelps. So I'm very proud to present Sandra Ichiho from Hensel Phelps.
Can you hear me? Am I on? No. Am I on?
Haley? Oh, there it is. Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's hot here. It's like 100 degrees still. Anyway, my name's Sandra Ichiho. I'm here from Southern California. And I just want to share with you my story and take you through the journey of my 40-year career. I look younger than I am. I'm not. Fox hair color works really nicely. But I want to share with you how the last 40 years has kind of shaped my ideas of allyship and how that's worked into where I came from and when I was able to retire early this year, where it brought me to. So hopefully you'll find it interesting. So I want to set the stage first, and I want everybody to close their eyes. And I want you to think of a time that you walked into the room and you were the only person in the room that looked like you. Look, come on, Sandra, you can do this. Now open your eyes. Can you raise your hand if you've never experienced that feeling? Everybody in this room has experienced that feeling. And I want you to now raise your hand if you really experienced that, but you're too embarrassed to tell the rest of us that you've never been in a room where nobody else was like you. That's how I spent the early years of my career, always walking into the room where nobody looked like me. And it was tough, but I was determined because after all, I was the one that chose to be there. Nobody was forcing me to be there. I was the one that chose to be in the room where nobody looked like me. So I'm third generation Chinese American. I'm from Sacramento, and it's a very diverse city. And I studied architecture in the early 80s. And at the time, half of my class were women, which was very surprising to me. However, when I got out and started working, all those women, they disappeared. Where did they go to? I've never been able to answer that question, but they were not in the workplace. And it was very strange. I kind of have a joke that all I did was work around white men. But every now and then, there'd be an Asian man that shows up at a meeting. And 9 out of 10 times, guess what? That guy, he was a civil engineer. And that worked every single time. It was always a civil engineer. Guess what? Third generation Chinese, my dad, he's a structural engineer. So he was that guy. And maybe that's where I got some of this from. So, I went to work as an architect. I spent 7 years in that side of the business, and I absolutely loved it. But over time, you know, it's okay when you're starting out, but I was drawing details to tell somebody how to build something, and I had no clue how things were being built. You know, I just asked the old guy next to me, they'd have a library of details, and I just copied them. And it wasn't a very good place to be. I didn't like being there, it was very uncomfortable. So I decided, I want to go out and spend a couple of years out in the field, and I want to learn how things are built. And then I'll come back and be a smarter architect. So I ended up going back to school and going through the CM program. I had packed my car and just moved to Seattle, Washington with no job. I was a very free spirit, and I was very brave back then. But I went back and I got my degree in construction management. And after I graduated, I set out to look for a job, and what do? You know, we didn't have the internet back then. You do research as much as you can, and then I sent 50 resumes out there. And I got a phone call. I was gonna go back to Sacramento. And it was a medium-sized general contractor. He took the time to call me. The president of the company, hello, this is Mr. So-and-so. I received your resume and I'm kind of interested why you want to get into construction. And I told him my story. You know what he told me? He said, construction's not a place for women. You're already an architect. I suggest that you just go back to architecture because being a woman in construction is going to be too difficult. You know what's the irony of that story? I don't live in Sacramento anymore, but my parents are still there. They're 90 years old and living independently. And I went up there to visit one day and my dad says, hey, can you bring this packet to the accountant for me? Just drop it off. I said, sure. I find my way downtown and they share a building with the same firm that told me, don't go into this because there's not a place for you. And I so badly wanted to knock on that door and ask for Mr. So-and-so to tell him that, you know what? You put a fire under me because nobody was going to tell me after going back to school for this that there was not a place for me here. I didn't do that, but it's just kind of fun to think about those little stories. Okay, so when I got into construction, it was in 1990. And that was a time when there were pinup calendars of nude women in job boxes. There were stories of strippers showing up at staff meetings. And it just wasn't a very woman-friendly place. I remember walking jobs when I was an architect and you get the little whistles out of the side of the mouth of crap men and you just kind of ignore it and move on. Strangely, I don't know what happened, and maybe somebody here can share that with me. It changed overnight. All of a sudden, one day, it was not acceptable to have strippers on the job site. It was not acceptable to have calendars pinned up on job boxes. It was not acceptable to have fair-skinned women advertising construction tools. I don't know what happened. Just like those women who didn't show up in the workplace, all of that went away. And so things started to change. So I got hired on with Hensel Phelps. I was actually already in my 30s. I had had a job as a construction manager for a little while. And I got put onto a job that was supposed to be very intense, but because of funding issues, you know, the job was kind of at a lull. And I showed up to work, and these guys had been working, you know, on this job for probably 6 months, and they kind of bonded. Back then, all of us didn't have our own computers. So a few of us shared a computer. Every day, the guys would get up and say to each other, where are we going to go to lunch today? And they'd take off and go to lunch. And nobody ever bothered to ask me. But I used that as a time to jump onto somebody's computer so I could get some of my work done. And you know, I wanted to be a team player. I was kind of giving me no test. This 30-year-old woman shows up. Well, what are they supposed to do with me? Okay? You know, the way Hensel Phelps worked, you start as a field engineer, and everybody knows what your role is, and that's what you go do. But then here I was, this anomaly that showed up. So if I look back, I was kind of given menial tasks, stuff to keep me busy. But those guys were working 12 hours a day, and I was doing everything I could to put 7 hours in, 8 hours in, but I was staying 10 hours. And I gotta be honest with you, I hated it. So I said, I don't fit in here. I'm 30 years old. I don't fit in here, and I'm not gonna put up with this. So I gave my notice. And somebody in the district office, the guy who was running it, he heard about it and he called me. He's like, let's go to lunch. I want to hear what's happening. And I told him my story. I didn't tell him the details. I just said, Wayne, I don't think I really fit here. And I want to be somewhere where I can fit. And it's nothing against Hensel Phelps. I just need to go find somewhere where I'm going to fit. And he says, can you give us a chance? He says, that job was supposed to be very intense, and I put very intense people on it that would just fly. And the jobs were kind of funny, and you know what? Just come in the office for a little while. We'll find something better for you. And I never looked back, and I loved every minute after that I worked for this company. But that experience taught me that I need to look around for the Sanders in the room who don't fit in, because this has to be a place for them too. I have this story that I used to show up to, we have these Saturday morning breakfast meetings that we would come to, and they'd be at a hotel room. And when you don't fit in, you kind of walk into the hotel and you look around and you're like, okay, where's this event that I'm supposed to be at? And to me, everybody that worked for Hensel Phelps looked like Tom Giersbach. Tom Giersbach, he's 6'2", he has blonde hair, he looks like a surfer dude, and he looks like a typical frat boy. And everybody to me in this company looked like Tom. And so all I did was kind of look around and see where the gathering of all those blonde haired boys were standing, and then I'd make my way over there. It's not like that. It wasn't like that. But that's sort of how I felt that this company looked like. Okay. So how did I manage this? You know anything about the Asian culture? This is really bad advice. And I tell everybody, every little Asian kid that comes to work for us, I tell them the same thing. Do not believe that by sitting in your cubicle with your head down, working hard, you're going to get recognized and you're going to be given opportunity because of that. That is false. That is not true. You get up out of your desk, you go get a cup of coffee, you find somebody, you talk to you go down to the office where all the bosses work, you go say good morning to them. That's how you're going to get ahead. And that's after you do a better job than everybody else. But sitting in your desk with your head down, don't expect anybody to notice you. I figured that out when I was young. Don't play the victim, okay? I didn't need Hensel Phelps to adjust to me. I needed to figure out how to fit into Hensel Phelps. We say we want our kids to be the smartest people in the room. I don't think that you can always be the smartest person in the room. You don't have control over that. But what we have control over is being the most prepared person in the room. You have control over that. So prepare yourself so that when you walk into those meetings and everybody in the room is smarter than you, you're the most prepared. You'll win every single time. And then I had to tell myself that I need confidence that I have a place here. They hired me. I was smart. I have great communication skills. I have a place here. So when I walk into the room, go sit at the table. Don't sit at the chair along the wall. Sit at the table. I coach all these young kids, when they walk into the room, I see these women sitting, I'll stare at them. Get up out of your chair and go sit at the table because you belong here. It's a lot of self-talk. And then I always had to bring my best self to work. I'll wake up every day. And when you don't feel like you belong, you can't bring your best self to work. You can't. you're too busy trying to figure out how to work the politics, but you gotta wake up and just come to work every day. Okay, that was the 90s. Now I wanna move into the 2000s. I was on every single diversity committee that Hensel Phelps has ever had. Right? Oh, get the Asian woman. She can bring her perspective to it. And over the decades, we've had a lot of successes and a lot of failures. Partly because we didn't know what we were doing. I think that early on, it was a bit academic. There were goals out there that we had to meet. But I'm not sure, and it's no strike against Hensel Phelps. I bet McCarthy has the same story, Sundt has the same story. It was very academic, but it wasn't in our hearts. Okay, and so we started gathering all these diverse people, but we didn't know what to do with it. And we tried our best, and then we kind of fail, and then we bring it up again, and then it kind of go. But the one thing we never did is give up. We would keep trying. So I think it was the mid-95, 96, we started gathering our women together. There were very few of us. There were probably a dozen of us at the first seminar that we had. But as the numbers started growing, because we concentrated on diversity, we started having more women at these things. And I was on the planning committees early on, and as we would, the funnest part was preparing for the seminar. And the women leaders knew that teaching leadership and the soft skills was going to be really important for the women. That wasn't really acceptable to the board at the time. So we would disguise our topics with technical names when we were trying to teach soft skills. I went through the records, and the name of our seminar, the title of our seminar was Taking Care of Business. The agenda was Define Art of Small Talk, Life Balance, What is Leadership, and Where are you in your journey? That is taking care of business, but it's a whole different side of business that we're trying to take care of. And the beauty of that was, if you fast forward 15 years later, 20 years later, the company finally figured out that those things that we were teaching the women all along were really good for the entire company. And what warms my heart is, as I leave the company, the thing that we were focusing on in Southern California, as I was leaving, was leadership effectiveness. And guess what my topic was? So, they had all the senior people take one of the topics. My topic was creating a caring workplace. Can you believe that? Hensel Phelps is teaching all of our leadership how to create a caring workplace, because it makes a difference. So early on, when I was a PM, I had been a PM for 3 months. And I was just learning the role. And my boss calls me up and he says, "Hey, Sandra, the PM seminar is coming up in a few months, and I don't know how this happened, because I've been to Greenby 2 times to start planning for the seminar, and your name never came up once to be a presenter." Of course not. I wasn't even a project manager. He goes, and then the notice came out of everybody who was presenting, and we have you down for margin analysis. I'm like, what the heck? Margin analysis? I've been a PM for 3 months, and I'm going to be in a room full of 200 white men teaching them how to do margin analysis? I was just beside myself. Guess what? I'm going to be the most prepared person in the room, because I didn't know what I was talking about. That seminar gave me a seat at the table to stand in front of all of the managers and operations managers and all the board who never knew me because I was in Southern California, to show that we have the Chinese American woman that works for us that knows what she's talking about. And if I think back on my career, I think that one seminar helped catapult my career. Because somebody in that room said, hey, we should have Sandra present at our seminar. When the committee never talked about it. I don't even know who it was, but somebody came up with that, with my name. And I'll tell you what, I presented at every seminar after that. Oh, okay. Then I became an operations manager. And shortly after I became an operations manager, I get this phone call again. And it says, hey, Sandra, all the OMs and the general superintendents, they come to all of our manager seminars and all of our project superintendent seminars. Project superintendent seminar was scheduled to be in 2 months from now. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm gonna be the only woman in the room with all these old crusty superintendents from around the country. I don't know about you guys, but our project manager seminars and our project superintendent seminars look completely different. And that project superintendent group is a tough crowd. The title of that seminar was Good to Great. And to my amazement, one of the main topics on getting good to great was about diversity. So we're still trying to talk about diversity, we're still trying to create diversity, but we're not quite sure how, but I think if we keep focusing on it, somehow we're gonna make it happen. Okay, now I'm gonna take you to the 2020s. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, a bunch of social injustice going on. It was a really difficult time. And we took it seriously. We would meet and say, how is this affecting the people that work for us? And that's when all this EEIC started kind of making its way, the discussions on it, and it just hit me. It hit me at that time that we were concentrating on diversity all these years, and we never understood equity and inclusion. And so we're just bringing people in the doors to get our numbers better, and yet we're not taking care of this group of people. And so the discussion started happening about how do we implement ideas of equity and inclusion into our company so that we can make all these people who are diverse that we've successfully brought in, how do we help them bring their best to work? So our group met in Southern California. We're spread around the country. So our group met in Southern California. It was one of the best groups that I've ever belonged to. We coined the term, everyone, every day. And I absolutely love it. Thank you. Because it just embodies what we just need to do. We need to include everyone every day. And it's bringing to the forefront that we have to give people a seat at the table so that we get to know them, we can see the potential people, to make people feel good, to let them prepare, and to succeed at things. And this is after we're done building these badass projects all around our region, that it's about leadership and making connections and recognizing people for who they are. We started something called reflective dialogues, where quarterly we come up with these questions and we send them out to the job sites, and everyone gets together in groups of 4 and discusses whatever these topics are. It could be a happy hour, it could be, during the workday, it just whatever works for those 4 people. And the reviews on that there was huge resistance because it's uncomfortable. Why are we doing this? We're so busy. And yet every time we do these things, people come back to us and say, holy cow, that was the best thing ever. I would have never talked to Rosemary if I hadn't been put in her group. And I got to know her, and we have lunch scheduled for next week. And so just making those connections around topics that are very interesting to talk about. Okay, so corporate responsibility, how do we move forward? Okay, here's my thoughts. For where your treasure is, where you invest your time and energy, that's where your heart will be. So when we started fixing our internal organization, it just blossomed itself to our relationships with our subcontractor community and the owners. Our work culture has an impact beyond the physical space where we work. It also includes conduct that's likely to impact everybody that we work around. Let women speak for themselves. We make a lot of decisions about women by projecting what we would do. Let them decide. Can I move? What about daycare? What about having children? It's like, it's my life, so I'll tell you what I can and can't do. Diversity without compromise. Southern California, our numbers are 22% female and 52% diverse. That's what Hensel Phelps looks like. And we got diverse without compromising, because I will tell you that we have the most complex jobs in the entire region, and we are doing those jobs with very strong teams. And if you have 52% diverse staff, that's what we bring. Personal responsibilities, action over words, look for and unleash people's potential, and make a positive environment, and just think about the small things when you're including people. Okay, so I experienced some uncomfortable things over the decades of my career, and in today's times, nobody should go through what I went through. It's just a different time. There are so many women and diverse people in our industry now. And as I was preparing for my retirement, it made people reflect on the relationship that I had with them. And the overwhelming message that I received from everybody was not about the impact that I made on them for being a better engineer or a better builder, but it was about thanking me for opportunities that I put in front of them, for believing in them, and for caring about them and their families. That's what everybody shared with me. So look at me, okay? Being an executive with the #1 contractor in the country, I am not that. I'm not the poster child for that. But that's where I got to spend my career. And I got to do that because somebody gave me a seat at the table and believed in me that I could do this. And I brought my best self to it. And for that, I'm forever grateful. So thank you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Wasn't that a great message from Sandra Ichiho? Yes, indeed. Sharing her experience and really highlighting how important allyship is. And as well, I also, really heard her talk about, just DEI and how it has evolved over the years. DEI is definitely a journey. It is not a sprint. It's not a checkbox. It is definitely it's that marathon. It's what we all have to really take time to implement step by step and really be intentional about it. So at this time, I'm going to introduce to you someone who's going to be facilitating this next panel. This next panel is going to be called Accelerating the Workforce Pipeline. That's something that we're all taking a look at and dealing with at this time. And I want you to know, because you've gotten some really good stuff at this Construction Inclusion Conference. Would you say so far it's been great? give me something on the Richter scale. There we go. Right. Absolutely. We've had a legal update that came from Colette, Holt. You've got a legal update as to what's going on. And then we went into how to invest in our communities, what's going on here locally, giving you a perspective as to what that looks like industry-wide as well. And then we just heard from Sandra Ichiho about allyship and the importance of it all. And just the journey that we all can relate to in some way. She said a lot of things that I can relate to, and I'm sure you can as well. So now, Mr. Kent Lane, who is manager of Supplier and Diversity for Hensel, not Hensel Phelps, but McCarthy. Yes, Hensel Phelps just left the stage. Just left the stage. But with McCarthy Building Company, I want to introduce a phenomenal individual who's very active in the community and in the space. Kent Lane, thank you so much for facilitating this next panel of Accelerating the Workforce Pipeline. Yes, give a round of applause. Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, see, I think my panel's going to appreciate this because I'm about to talk to you about this. So just give me a second. As many of you know me, I'm in the military. I was in the military, right? So we like to hear some enthusiasm. So when I say good morning, I hear good morning. There we go. That's what I'm talking about, that energy. Let's go. So it's a privilege to be able to do this panel discussion. I'm excited for the panel members to come up here shortly. One of the things that's near and dear to me as the Supplier Diversity Community Outreach Manager, I get a chance to be out in the community and talk to different individuals from Colorado to Arizona, as those are my two regions that I do cover. And what's interesting and fascinating about this is the same issues that are happening in the construction industry here in Arizona is the same things that are happening in Colorado. And they were talking to me about their challenges and what has come up to them. And they talk about, how do we get more people involved within the construction industry, and how do we move forward to develop the skills of those who are younger. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce my panel members one by one. So I'm gonna bring up Tom Cole, Director of Arizona Registrar of Contractors. Kyle Mitchell, Program Analyst Senior, South Mountain Community College. Paul Sanders, Workforce Development Manager, Build Your Future Arizona. And Sean Ray, Vice President, Craft Workforce Development, Sundt Construction. So I know we're going to be talking about workforce, but I have some questions for you. It's a little bit different. I understand we have some military members on this panel. Go ahead and tell me about what branch you're in real quick, and we'll take it from there. So go ahead.
I was in the United States Navy, sonar technician.
Okay, thank you.
And myself, U.S. Army.
U.S. Army. We'd like to give all our veterans a hand up. Oh, there's Ricardo back there too, Air Force. So Ricardo, you're going to appreciate this question. So I have to ask this, right? This is the first panel discussion. And those of you that are in the military, I'm sure you'll be able to handle this question very good. So I hear that the Air Force is not a real military. That's word on the street. That's what I heard. Can you all elaborate on that for me, please?
Comment.
If it's the same, I can't concur.
And I cannot concur. My father-in-law was in the Air Force.
All right, now. See, Ricardo, I told you to appreciate that.
My grandfather was Army Air Corps, World War II, so.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick up for the Air Force, even though I did not serve.
I appreciate you, sir. So I do want to ask Marine Corps, Army, you guys, I want to ask you this one thing. Did you all like our chow halls? Golf courses? Air conditioning? I'm just saying, we just had some of those things. Not to put you guys in the spot, but I'll just put you guys in the spot, but I know, very rude. I don't think Patty discussed that. I was taking over this panel very well. Okay, very good.
Preparation.
Well, thank you. So let's get into it. So, of course, we're talking about workforce and the workforce shortage and the shortage of people who are skilled laborers within this industry, and not only this industry but others. But it seems to be very significant within the construction industry on this side of it. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to have you all tell your stories, and I want you to talk about your experiences within the workforce, as far as the workforce and the shortage of workforce. So, Tom, I'm going to start with you, and why don't you give us your background?
Well, I work for a regulatory agency, and that's universally popular with our clientele. I've come to this industry kind of from a different angle. Safety is my angle, and I spent 28 years as a firefighter. I worked my way up from firefighter, paramedic, fire captain, promoted to battalion chief, ultimately serving as deputy chief operations for the Glendale and the Goodyear fire departments. So I've spent, almost 30 years figuring out how buildings come apart. But I've spent a lot of time on workforce development in the fire department. And I'm embracing, this is my third Wednesday on the job, by the way, so I'm a little shaky up here. Please be patient.
You're doing fine.
But my interest in this aspect is the building safety, and that means we have to hold people accountable. But the idea of properly training a diverse workforce to do the best job they can possibly do with putting these projects together means the world to the public, and it means the world to public safety. I hate to say it, but houses are glued together these days, in my opinion. And compared to ordinary construction from from decades past, those systems aren't properly installed and constructed. They become a real problem for the occupants, and then certainly under emergency conditions. So I've been embraced by this agency. We have to walk the walk, right? We're going to talk about diversity, and this agency embraces diversity. Embraces the DEI and the A. What we're working on now is accessibility, access to the process. So we are thoughtfully going through our Sentinel materials, our documents, to convert them to Spanish so they're accessible to the bilingual community or to the Spanish primary speaking community. In my workforce, we've embraced telecommuting, and we have great metrics to hold people accountable for their productivity, but you can really promote a diverse workforce when you offer them the opportunity to work from home. So we're doing our share, I think. We have more to do. We don't have parity on all of our categories, but we hit parity on a lot of them as far as diverse in the EEO4 standards. So again, I'm the new guy. Be patient with me, but I've learned a lot in my 3 weeks, and I'm looking forward to the future. We have a very bright future with the agency. So thank you.
Thank you. I think you're doing an amazing job. So I think that's why they hired you, right? Kyle, you want to share?
Yes. It's on? Yeah. Okay. All right. So good morning, everybody. I am Dene, which is Navajo. So yate Dene, she Kyle Mitchell, Ichiho, Fujichi, Nichol, Mackay, Dosichi, Anitiche, Mackay, Dishnella. So we always do that to, solidify our kinship. So I know there's at least one or two Navajos here, for sure. I saw you earlier. You stuck out, so that's to acknowledge that. So I work with South Mountain Community College, and we started a construction trades institute back in 2020. At the height of the pandemic, we launched in the fall of 2020. We had tremendous success. We had 100% retention completion. It was amazing. We serve a diverse population at South Mountain, right? Diversity of veterans, women, first-generation students, all of them. It's been tremendous. With myself more personally, I served in the military, 6 years, U.S. Army. After I got out, I hit the reset button like many of us do, trying to figure out what to do. So I kind of jumped around. I did wildland firefighting for 2 seasons. I worked in construction, worked with a glazing company, learned how to weld, all while going through ASU. And so once I completed, I got a good internship and just launched my career in education. So really, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's something that takes everybody. It's not just a checkbox. It's not just looking at that. It's having the hard conversations and inviting the feedback. That's how we move the needle. What are we doing? Take a temperature check and move forward. And so with that, I'm thankful to be here today, and that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you. Paul Sanders with Build Your Future Arizona. It's kind of ironic because as a kid growing up, my dad had his own roofing company. And so at the age of 5, he took me out onto the job site. My job was to pick up the shingle wrappers, the straps, put them in the back of the truck. And then, of course, as I went through middle school and high school and my early years in college, I was working with my dad. Everybody else got paid. I didn't get paid. He said that I lived at home and he provided things for me, so that was good enough for me. Anyhow, learned shingle installation, hot asphalt roof, standing seam, sheet metal, all that kind of stuff, right? And this was back east, so I didn't like working in the cold and the wet. I thought, no, I'm going to go to college. This is where my focus is going to be. And started a business degree at West Virginia University. And as I was in my second year, I started realizing, we can actually make money doing this if, my dad was interested. And that's all it was a passing thought. So went on, came out here to Arizona seeking fame and fortune in '85, and wound up working for the Arizona Republic for 15 years. And then specialty publications with the Phoenix Business Journal for another 15 years. And came to a point in my career where I started saying, serving on different boards, seeing how things were influencing the next generation, what could I do for giving back to the community, and got into the workforce sector 8 years ago with an organization that was focusing on opportunity youth and how do we connect them to career paths with college training. And then the pandemic hit. And it was a corporately funded program from lots of companies across the nation, and they all couldn't make their commitments in the spring of 2019. It's 2020, by the 2020. And so they had to reduce the workforce, but I transitioned on over to the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation. And when they found out that I had grown up working in construction, they said, oh, can you help us with our Build Your Future initiative? And I said, yeah. I said, it's a long time ago. Construction is nowhere near what it was when I was involved. But that's how I came to be involved in this particular effort now, focusing on trying to get the word out to 18 to 24-year-olds that there is a viable career path in construction to 6-figure incomes. How do you get that training? What are their while you learn programs, and connecting them, whether they be in high school or what I call boomerang, who are 20 to 24-year-olds that graduated from high school but didn't pursue any higher education, and now after working in warehousing, restaurant, and food services say, what do I do? So that's our mission, is to try to get in front of those folks and connect them with career opportunities.
Sean?
So I wish I could tell you that my pathway into construction was planned, but it was nowhere near it. Graduated high school, joined the Navy, wanted my GI Bill so I could, pay for college. One thing the recruiter didn't tell me, Ken, and I don't know how yours was, but he didn't tell me there was a lot of work you do besides what you signed up for. So I was signed up as a sonar tech, right? So I was supposed to hunt some Marines. It looked really cool on the movies and whatnot. But they didn't tell me that the 12 hours that I wasn't standing watch, I also had to work on the equipment. So I started working on the cooling skids for the sonar system and started learning instrumentation, started learning screw pipe, and didn't really think about it. It was just part of the job that I had. I get out of the Navy, I moved back home,
gonna go to college, but I caught it right in between semesters and I gotta work still. So a friend of mine was working for a process piping contractor, said, why don't you come out, we'll hire you on as a helper and you can go to school once the semester starts. I show up on the job site, start working, and I'll be honest with you, I fell in love with it. You know, parts of what I missed from the military, the camaraderie, you know, the focus driven, it was there. So I kept putting school off for a year, 2 years, and I didn't go back to school until I was 40. Working away from a pipe fitter to a journeyman, to a foreman, to a superintendent, operations manager, and then I started at Sundt in 2014 in workforce development, and it's been a great ride since then.
Amazing. You know, what's interesting, what you just talked about, you know, being in the military, you have other jobs that you do. Certainly my unit, Ricardo's unit, they call this POL, so petroleum, oils, and liquids. Also known as painting, odd jobs, and landscaping. So we did all these different types of things, right? So it was all over the place.
Yeah.
But, you know, hearing you all speak on this panel, it really brought something to mind real quick, because the pandemic really hit people hard, right? And it really affected not only people, you know, with their, you know, their income, but it really affected people psychologically as well too. So I wonder if you all can touch on this question. I know it's off script, but how were we able to start the process of trying to bring people back in to the workforce, particularly construction, and being a fire chief? I'm sure that's another piece that's really challenging as well too. So how did we start that process? So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Well, one of the things that I've learned is that the accommodations we had to make for the pandemic, everybody learned how to use Zoom or Google Meets or what's the Microsoft one? I always forget. Teams. I use that one more than any other. We learned to be effective. We learned how to get the job done. And one of the things the state of Arizona has done is embrace that, where industry is feeling in a lot of instances that they have to bring people together again for a number of reasons. A lot of square footage in offices that they're paying for is one of them. A lot of them like that you know, collaboration that they get by being in offices next to each other or cubicles. But the state's embraced telework as an incentive to get people to come to work for the state. So we've perpetuated that work model, and it's working for us in Rock. We have a very robust telework, as I mentioned before, and it's just working. It's very popular, and obviously, you know, the state's one of the best paid employers in the state. So, again, our governor's been known to say, hey, you know, if you're working for industry and they're calling you back into the office, come work for the state and you can stay home. That's one accommodation.
Thanks about that accommodation. Yeah, Kyle, so why don't you go ahead and share also, please.
No problem. So 2020, we had a phrase that my VP termed be fluid. And I don't think that encompasses everything, right? The crooks, the grannies, all those things. So I remember we left for spring break, and then that was it. We're gone. We were supposed to be back the next week. It turned into a month. But we knew we had a dedication. You know, we met with our industry partners. We met with, you know, our faculty, everybody else, and we had to move that needle regardless. So what we did is we, you know, did a temperature check. Here's our precautions. Here's our protocols. Here's what we're doing. And we just moved forward with it. You know, we looked at, you know, an opportunity. We had a timeline. We're going to launch in fall of 2020, all the things that go into that. One thing I think that a lot of people don't realize, especially out of the construction industry, is all the shortage, right? And all the backdating orders. I pretty much called A through Z suppliers here in the state, just trying to get lumber, trying to get piping for our plumbing program, everything. But we just stayed dedicated. You know, and on the other side, the companies, you know, grateful for the suppliers here, they were really dedicated too. You know, let's see what we can do to help you. We believe in your mission. We believe in your goal. How can we support you through that? And so again, it was, you know, no in-person meetings. It was being virtual for everything, right? Teaching everybody how to learn, how to have a meeting on Zoom. More importantly, where the camera is and where the mute button is, those were key.
Isn't that the truth?
Exactly.
I mean, how often, I'm going to, by show of hands, how often has everybody been on Zoom, Teams, or whatever it is, and you start talking and that mute button's on?
Oh, yeah.
Right. All of us. Yeah, so we can certainly understand that challenge. Paul?
You know, obviously the pandemic affected my career path that was there, I think in a good way, but I would say what I'd want to share with this group to be aware of, it significantly impacted students. A big part of what we do is outreach. We're meeting and getting in front of high school students that are making decisions on career technical education and so forth. And not only have I observed it in the classroom, but I hear it from the instructors, that I don't think we recognize that impact that it had on students for that couple of year period in social, in maturity, in communication skills, and so forth. And we're starting to ramp that back up. And I think that that's going to affect us in the industry as we're bringing in people that will be graduating, this year and within the next couple of years. So I think that's something we have to try to be aware of in whatever we're going to be doing to be bringing that talent in. That's kind of the big impact that I see in relationship to workforce and how that's really tying together.
Very much so. Sean?
So Ken, my whole job is dealing with our craft professionals, right? Our welders, pipe fitters, plumbers. So I tend to talk a lot about what they went through. And I gotta tell you, when the pandemic hit, we gave them a big badge of honor and called them essential workers. And there was a lot of pride that was put in that, maybe for the first time, our skilled craft were considered essential. And they took a lot of pride in that. And so, the clients that kept their job sites open, we made sure to move our craft professionals to those jobs. We had some clients who shut their job sites down for a bit, but we were able to keep them working. And I think it was a lot different than what we call administrative employees had to go through with the team meetings and whatnot. But our skilled craft, they were riding high on being considered essential and keeping them working.
Very important. As this conference, we're looking at Construction Inclusion Week. It's a week-long celebration and those things. And the items that you all just touched upon really brought up another question for us. And really, we're talking about being inclusive, right? Being inclusive in every industry, every facet. When we narrow this down to construction, we want to find out, what are some innovative ways for being inclusive with like veterans, women, and people who are in unrepresented communities? So Kyle, why don't you start us off with that question?
No problem. So what we've done at South is, of course, we're student facing. So one thing that we did is to make sure everybody who walks through our door has opportunity is we linked up with the state through Arizona at Work. We put all of our certificates online to make that more open to everybody in the public. In addition to that, one thing that was surprisingly since we launched the construction trades, is we've had at least a handful of veterans in every cohort. And the thing about it is, with the veterans, they were really interested in, I'm tired of working for somebody else. I want to do my own thing. I want to learn those skills. I want to be my own boss and do that. And so what we did is we really kind of sat down with them, did a little focus group, like, what is it you like? What is it you don't like? What type of learning style, things like that, more inclusive of that. And then from there, once we got kind of that preliminary data, we moved that into the other minority groups we had. So we had a few female students, we had a lot of Hispanic students, we had a few African American students, and a few Native students. And so we did the same thing, kind of just getting a temperature check. And the great thing about it is, our faculty, they're two crusty old guys. That's just the way to put it. And they fully embrace that. But I think it's really good because they have that old school mindset of where I just need a job done. And here's my expectation. Here's the outcomes I'm looking for. And even within the climate we have right now, people will rise to the occasion. You just have to set that standard. And another thing that we've done to be more inclusive is when we have open talks in every cohort, we share what's going on. We share a topic. Here's what's happening in America today. Here's what's happening in the workforce today. Here's what's happening to the industry. And then we tell all of our students to give us feedback. And so when I teach, I have this motto of your first thought's your best thought, right? Because when you have time to think, you kind of gloss it over, fluff it up a little bit, but your first response is always your most pure and true. And so we go off of that, and we're inclusive of that. And when it comes to, cultural things, we're also sensitive to that because we do have a high population of the Paskoyaki that are in our program. And so they have certain religious holidays. And so instead of saying these students don't have that, we had the students, do a presentation to their own classmates. We brought the tribe in and we just explained the relevancy of this on an individual level and how important that is. And so having that bonding moment every semester, that cohesiveness really builds that community.
Great. Paul?
It's interesting. We're led by an industry steering committee, so they make the decisions about what happens with our campaigns. And one thing that they have really been supportive of over the past 4 years is our emphasis on Women in Construction Month. Also, the feedback from the companies that have invested in the campaign and on the steering committee have been how outstanding females are for us in the skilled trades. So we make it a point in our presentations to communicate that. And also to try to help the young women know that this is a course you could pursue in any particular direction. So that's really been a high emphasis that we've got that's with it. And then of course we do talk about, but it seems like the companies that are really successful with DE&I efforts are the ones who are assigning mentors to a lot of these young folks that are coming in. And it's been interesting to learn about how some of the crusty ones that they're assigning to some of the young people, that's actually been working effective for them. Now the yelling and screaming and barking and that kind of thing hasn't been so effective, but a lot of the progressive organizations that are participating with us are able to give those examples when they come along with us and talk in the classrooms. So they're getting a feel that this is a place for everyone to come and be a part of. But we do it a special emphasis on bringing people.
Love that. Thank you. John?
So I can't say what we're doing is necessarily innovative, but there's two areas that we really feel like we need to focus on. I think the contractors in Arizona do an amazing job working with community colleges, high schools, McCarthy, Hensel, Phelps, DPLR, Sundt. We all have focus areas, right? But the two areas, one of them, we're focusing on government relations, right? We need more funding for the programs that are existing and funding to build new ones. We talk about the high schools first. It's a struggle for a lot of our high schools to get the materials they need for their construction programs. A lot of the programs went away in the early 2000s, right, replaced by computer labs. And now we're back to needing these programs again, and that takes money to set them up. The second part is the educators themselves. I would ask how hard it was to keep his staff, because a lot of the high schools and community colleges will tell you that it's hard to find people to teach construction classes when they can make double in the industry, right? So you have to find those people who are passionate, possibly retired. So we're meeting with legislators, we're meeting with the governor's office, we're meeting anywhere we can to talk about this more and more to try to get the awareness out there that we've got to start funding these programs. We could go to, and I won't mention the name, but we went to one school and we gave them $5,000, and that doubled the material budget. That's insanity, right? The second part is I think there's a critical component of pre-apprenticeship. Most of your pre-apprenticeships out there are not-for-profit. They focus on underrepresented communities, and apprenticeship to me is one of the ways that we'll build the construction industry back up. But we got to focus on those pre-apprenticeships as well to start getting students from their pre-apprenticeships into apprenticeship programs, so we can continue to build our future leaders.
Yes, something.
Yeah, just to springboard off that education piece. The governors launched an initiative, the Build It AZ Apprenticeship Initiative. And the goal is to double the number of construction trade apprentices by the year 2026. It's an ambitious goal, but to that end, she's allocated $500,000 in federal grant money to expand existing apprenticeship programs. It's seed money. There needs to be more, and I think everybody recognizes that, but it's a start. So the state's fully behind the need, understanding the need, and taking steps to try and help expand the workforce, and Build It AZ is one of those steps.
Love that. Good to answer that. Paul, you want to add something too?
Another component in what Sean and Tom are saying about the pre-apprenticeship programs, I met with a high school district this past week who wants to figure out how they can get industry support, literally with bodies in the classroom, that they can orchestrate a pre-apprenticeship program for students with some capstone projects. And they have the funding, but they need that industry to be in the classroom and ask them to do that for 2 hours a week, right? Crafts people right alongside somebody with this. So now all the NCCR training they're providing for these students and that certification that comes gives a much stronger thing with a completed apprenticeship, plus industry is almost trying before they buy by being involved in seeing these students in there. And their goal is to have 50 students complete that for this year. So they're trying to figure out how do they make that happen for the spring and the fall of next year. So we've got a lot of educators that are ready for this. Now we got to figure out how do we help industry step up to provide that. Now the challenge, of course, is shorthanded, right? We don't have enough people to do the regular work, let alone give them 2 hours in there. So the thought was, do we leverage industry's skilled craft professionals who are on their way out? Do we leverage the ones that may be serving in something that would be considered administrative now, but have the actual craft experience? And then those are the kind of things where we need industry support.
No, that's great. Thank you. That's also brought up another question, because it's when we talk about the inclusive and as an industry, really it's a community. Community support those that may be looking for that opportunity to be able to be in a construction industry or trade or craft or something to that nature. So it really brought up something that a gentleman and I just spoke about earlier, which were people who are transitioning out of the justice system and women. And you, of course, this is a male-dominated industry, right, to be frank. And so how do we work with individuals that are transitioning from the justice system that, and quite frankly, and the gentleman and I spoke about this too, just getting the fundamental necessity of having an ID, just having an ID to be able to move forward with their life. So Paul, maybe you can touch upon this.
We've had an opportunity to interface a little bit with some programs that are doing this, and there are actually about 4 or 5 construction companies that I know of that are actually meeting with a couple of these different agencies on a monthly basis to talk about how they can bring individuals in. And all those wraparound services, that's what you're really referring to about that ID portion. It's helping to have employers understand what that is, okay? A lot of these, whether you want to refer to them as second chance opportunities or whatever the case may be, many companies are willing to do that and bring somebody in. But not everyone understands those simple things, right? That are going to be a hindrance that are there. So how do either the organization support with those wraparound services or the industries that are there? And fortunately, those 2 companies that I was referring to that deal with these individuals, they already have those services in place, so they'll work with a construction company to make sure that they can help overcome those hurdles that are there. It's trying to make sure industry is aware of it, because it is an untapped one that's there. And the 2 organizations that I know, or the 2 companies that were working with these organizations, they were recruiting about 3 to 5 people per month through that system for entry-level positions with their organization. So it's something that all of the companies can look at and consider, from small to large.
Awesome. Anybody else can add to that? Yes, go ahead.
Part of the other issue is, there again, the government relations side. So I can tell you at Sundt, we don't do background checks on our craft professionals unless it's required by the client. And more and more of our clients are requiring background checks. So water projects fall under the Department of Homeland Security, background checks. Semiconductor, background checks. So that needs to be part that maybe we as a construction industry come together to try to push more on, because I don't think it's a contractor issue. I think it's us having to follow the requirements that are put in front of us on the contract.
So on the regulatory front, there was a time and a place when a felony conviction was a hard no to get a contractor's license. That is not the case anymore. Now, we do look at them on a case-by-case basis, and there are some that are challenging, and we do say no from time to time based on the type of conviction and their current status in the justice system. But we encourage folks to apply if they've got the background and they've got and they're prepared. It's not a hard no anymore. Just on the diversity front too, that I failed to mention before, the Title 41 provides for waiving of licensure fees, contractor included, for veterans, and it also provides for low-income folks. So folks up to 200% who make less than 200% of the poverty level, federal number, can qualify for waiver of licensure fees. So again, another attempt to promote diverse applications for contractors. Thanks.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Yes. So our sister college, Real Salado, is a really phenomenal program in transitioning. So folks who are out at Lewis, who are in Florence, things like that. So they focus on soft skills at first, and then their achievement normally is a GED. And so on the academic side, if you're going for FAFSA, if you're going for grant funding, if you have a felon or a record, a lot of times you don't meet those scholarship requirements, which is why we've started through our foundation a scholarship just for our construction trades. And I'm happy to say that 100% of that has gone towards individuals who could not get financial aid. Either they have a big account, past due, or they were previously incarcerated. And so by having that opportunity there, we're not closing the door, we're keeping it open. And so it's just finding those nooks and crannies there of how we can help the student overall achieve their success.
Fantastic. I want to circle back to, we talked about people who are transitioning out of the justice system into different types of trades or even the construction industry. Let's talk about the challenge of the 18 to 25-year-olds coming into this industry. What does that look like? I mean, is it more like, hey, I got this Xbox waiting for you. You want to get on this project? Is that like an incentive bonus? Okay, just do some Instagram, YouTube type videos, what we're doing, right? I don't know. Guys, help me out. Sean, maybe you can help me understand this. How do we recruit more women and people who are in the 18, 25-year-old range? Because that's what we're looking at.
I think we got to share the progress that we've made in construction. There's so many stereotypes. There's so much. I was, broken heart listening to Sandra talk about her time in construction because I was coming up in construction at the same time. And as I moved my way into management, I'm the tattooed white guy, non-degree, sitting around executives and felt very uncomfortable most of the time that I was in there. But we got to start sharing the changes that we have seen, right? So I think about my team. I have 14 people on my team. Half of them are bilingual, okay? We can all remember a time when if you had an accent or your English wasn't perfect, that was actually a negative. Well, now it's considered a strength, right? I have bilingual people who can talk to our craft folks. We're 73% minority at Sundt in the field, right? So some of the things that were seen as a negative in the past are starting to be seen as strengths. Same thing with women in construction. When I first started at Sundt in 2014, there were 0 women in our executive board. Now there's 4, right? Our apprenticeship of women in our apprenticeship has gone up every year. We started at 0 4 years ago. We're at 8% now. So we got to tell that story. We got to tell them about the opportunities in construction, not that it's just a job, but it is a career and the technology that we use. And show them BIMs, show them some of the drone work that they do, and they may find it close to their Xbox in some ways.
Virtual reality. Who else?
One thing that Sean's talking about here that's really interesting, and you're bringing it up, Kent, is This is the first time in history that 5 generations are in the workforce at the same time. It's normally been where we've had people out. We've got folks that are staying in there longer. We've got a new group that's come in and leaving. And we've got each one of those groups, whether that's the Gen Z right now, whether that's the millennials or the baby boomers. There are things that are important, right, to all those people. And too many times we've emphasized what the differences are. But surprisingly, when you look at numbers of things that are surveyed from Gen Z and compare them to the boomers, Gen Z is actually very concerned about retirement, about job security, right? They've seen that. Millennials have gone through some of that downturn that were there, but they may be pushing to get some things done. And I think too many times we're separating ourselves into these groups and not recognizing where the commonalities are and where that can be a strength that's in there. So I think that's really important for us to think about as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that these young people can bring a lot to it. Now, the deal is they expect it to be proven, right? They'll give you their trust and their loyalty, but it doesn't come the way that Sean and I may have gone through that, right? Okay, whether somebody yelled at us or, we didn't take it personal, but we just thought that was the nature of what it was. But we're also understanding that if you think about what we do at DE&I, it is about respect, right? It is about communication. It is about being transparent with people. And those, I think, are some of the areas we want to maybe be focusing on and figuring out how to leverage that so that we can help them see this is a viable career path. And then again, it's a lucrative career path if you can be able to connect with it and find that right organization, right? That's the key.
Absolutely. Well, we're talking about workplace culture as well. We're looking at not only physical safety, but psychological safety. That's day 4, that's tomorrow. So don't miss out on that. There's several ways you can participate in a lot of different types of webinars and toolbox talks and those types of things off the construction inclusion website. I have to get to this question though. So I'm gonna see if we can handle this in a different way. Let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in construction. How do we simplify the ideas in our day-to-day work? And so so just explain into somebody that's new to the industry, how does that work? Right? So how does DE&I and construction industry, how do we simplify the ideas into our day-to-day work? And let's start with Tom.
Well, I think somebody mentioned culture. I really think that that's the key. Leadership has to reflect those principles day to day. Your hiring practices need to factor in DEI and A. So you can build it into the infrastructure of your business plan, but the leadership has to reflect that. They have to talk about it every day. When I joined the fire department, it was a boys club. And we had fire stations in Glendale that didn't even have female restrooms. Just all we had was a male locker room. If you look at the makeup of your fire departments today, they're cross-cultural, cross-gender. They are as diverse as any organizations you'll see. The culture has just done a 180, and I think that's reflective of society. So I think you just got to walk the walk. Everybody talks about it, but you really got to model that behavior for it to be successful.
Right.
So what I would say is, I think DEI, what it really does is it allows everybody to have a voice at the table. And so a way to self-advocate, what I tell the students all the time is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? There's other people making choices about your life, about what you're going to be doing, your best interests. And so with that, you're just more robust. The more perspectives you get, you might be looking at something but not seeing it from a certain angle, right? There might be somebody with that knowledge, that voice that can raise that awareness there. And I think it really sets the standard, right? And just like Tom said, you have to model that from the top, right? You have to show that you're inclusive, that you're hearing everybody out, and involving everybody in that initiative. So that's my minor input for the construction.
I like it. Go ahead.
I think that Tom captured it, and when we think of some of the companies that Sean mentioned, it really is the culture that is being fed and I don't want to say push down, I would say embrace down, right? It's a matter of helping superintendents that can embrace that type of thing. Because they're the ones who are making decisions about hiring, right? And you may have quotas or things that you're wanting to shoot for, but if you don't help them know, and in my opinion, show the numbers about companies that are successful who've embraced DE&I and how that's impacted their bottom line, because of those ideas, the feedback, and everybody being at the table, really can make some drastic impacts on profitability and the way that things can move forward.
John?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what everybody said. I think culture is the key and talk is cheap, right? So a lot of companies talk. It's been going on for a while, but where's the proof, right? So I'll give you another example. You know, when I was coming up in the industry, we always did pre-test plans or job hazard analysis. And they were all in English. But we know we had people on the crew who didn't speak English. And on these forms, it lists out the hazards in the area that you're working in. Stuff that'll kill you. And everybody has to sign this form, but you have people in the crew who couldn't read it. But you're still making them sign this form saying, hey, I know you told me that this could hurt me. It's insurance, right? We're now at a point, thank God, that we have all of our documents in English and in Spanish, right? That to me was a shift. When you talk women in construction, having separate porta potties in the field for the craft folks, right? Having a mother's room for a woman who needs to breastfeed. Those kind of things are real. It's not just a cool banner. It's not just a logo on the side of a truck. The people need to see it to believe it.
Absolutely. So here's one more question. So in terms of measuring the DE&I efforts within work itself, so what is one metric you would use to see whether it was making a difference or otherwise? So let's start with Kyle on this question. Which one metric do you feel?
One metric would be our enrollment every semester. You know, we really look at, are we reaching every population? Are we reaching every group out there within our feeder space? You know, when we think about, you know, DEI, a lot of times we go towards ethnicity, but it's not. You know, it could be social economic, it could be first generation student, it could be veterans, it could be a plethora of things. And so what we look at every semester is we reflect on the cohort. Okay, you know, are we more inclusive of this group? You know, are we expanding into this group? And our next thing that we're really working on to really show our dedication is we're looking for more faculty members. So we're looking for adjuncts, you know, and from my two instructors, you know, they told me we need somebody in there that reflects the community, somebody that is the majority, you know, somebody that can come in and speak to those things. And so that's the way we're kind of moving the needle on that, is we, you know, revisit our cohorts, you know, we make sure that we're touching all these groups. And also when we're touching these groups, we're not saying that this is what we think is good for you. This is an option you might not have thought of. And so it's all in the verbiage and the way you approach it.
Thank you. Paul?
I think a big one for our initiative is what we're doing within the high schools and the influence we're having to get diverse students to enroll in construction-related CTE programs. I mean, it's been interesting. I've participated in some engineering classes that we presented to this week, and there were about 25 students in each class, but there were anywhere from 5 to 8 of those students were female. And if we looked ethnicity-wise, we had about 25% that would probably be considered Hispanic, right? So when I see that we're starting to move that needle. And then when we talk with the actual instructors about the success rate that's going on with some of those students, they tend to say the same thing that I've heard in the industry about a lot of female students really perform well. So I think my measurement would be, how are we seeing that we're feeding in that entry level? How are we feeding into the training programs that are available, that are out there? Are we getting that word out to them to say, hey, this is where there can be a great opportunity for you? That would be my measure.
Thank you. John?
So I'm gonna go in a different direction. I really believe to show how valuable our programs are is focusing on retention. If we have the programs in place and we're treating people the right way for the right reasons, then our retention number should be solid. If that retention number isn't strong, then we're not doing what we should be doing.
Awesome.
I'd just like to shout out to our outreach folks. Cindy's here, Jesse's here. If you've got an initiative statewide, if you've got an initiative for the industry where you're trying to promote access, education, the Rock will help. We touch tens of thousands of people on a routine basis with our outreach efforts. And we'll support your initiative if it means promoting the industry, helping you recruit folks. So please call us, please talk to our professionals here, and they will help. Thanks.
So if you want to leave one lasting thought to the audience, what would that be? Who would like to go first?
Hire licensed contractors.
Budget problem.
I like that. That's good. I don't think I can top that one. Let's see. I would say, we think of education in the sense of where you have to have a certain, credential wise, but with our construction program, we're very unique because we are credit based. So meaning a student can complete our certificate, 16 weeks, 16 credits, and then if they want to go back to school, they go in the field, they work, but they continue, that feeds directly into construction management, which then transitions directly to ASU. And so what I would say is come join our team, be part of that initiative, give back to the community, help cultivate the next flow of the workforce needed here in the state.
Thank you.
I think my parting message would be, we need the industry to really be thinking and focusing on what are you doing for entry-level talent to build that pipeline that you need. All your pain points that you're experiencing right now with no skilled craft is because we've not put forth the effort needed in these years. I know we've had lots of things that we're competing against, right? But I think it's a very conscious effort. I feel like any companies that are not saying, I need to bring in and determine your number. If you're small, maybe it's 3. If you're a larger company, maybe it's 50. But figure it out, because that needs to be your pipeline for moving forward. And what are you doing, just as Sean has said, to retain them? Because that's the way your future is going to go with this. Rather than trying to steal people from each other, or just trying to figure out how do we make a Band-Aid over it. We have to really make that commitment to look at what we're doing on that end of it, from the entry level to the retainer.
Great, thank you. Sean?
I would just ask everyone to help us have a big voice with the government relations piece, right? Let's all get a voice out there, help rebuild our high school programs, help get community college even more funding, because that serves all of us. That serves opportunity for everybody. That helps the construction industry. That helps the economy in Arizona. There's really no losing proposition if we all have a solid education program.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those last thoughts. So this last thing, and this is going to be a tough one. I'm going to shoot at you. Thank you so much for being part of this panel. It was so amazing to hear what you all have to share with us. It was great value. I got to say, great value for all of us, and can't say enough. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, gentlemen. Thank you all. Yes, sir. Next.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Kent. Great job. Wow. You know what? I'm going to tell you to give yourself some snaps, right? That's like a poetic way of applauding yourselves for staying through this construction inclusion conference when you could have been somewhere else. You're here. And you got all your gold nuggets, but I will tell you that there is so much more for you to get, because as it relates to DEI, it is definitely an ongoing journey. It is not that checkbox. It is an ongoing journey. So first of all, what I want to tell you about, if you have not gone over to PriceCon's table, PriceCon, raise your hand. Everybody see PriceCom? Visit their table, drop your business card for a chance to win a $50 gift card from Dick's Sporting Goods. Okay, now's the time. $50 gift card. There you go. Put your card in the pot and see what you get. Hopefully, that'll be you today. So, wow. I tell you, for myself, here I am. It has been a privilege being able to MC this particular conference, this Construction Inclusion Conference. Again, very exclusive to this area and also to the industry. Today, we've covered lots of good information. We started out getting a legal update from Colette Holt. She gave us a synopsis of the legislature around DEI and how implementing DEI can be affected through the legislature. We also heard from Patty Oles. She facilitated a panel concerning investing in our DEI, in our communities from a DEI perspective. So we heard from individuals here locally and internationally on how to do that and what that actually looks like. Then we had a keynote speaker, Sandra Ichiho. She talked about allyship, and she went through her journey, her DEI journey around how she has seen it progress through the years. And then just here we had Kent Lane, who facilitated a panel all around accelerating the workforce and how important that is, different tips and practical ways of actually doing so. Give these individuals a hand along with our sponsors that were mentioned today, please. You know, for myself, as one who speaks on DEI, consults on DEI, teach DEI at Sundt Construction as well as other areas within the country, honestly, hearing this information and seeing all of us together today to really celebrate and embrace the concepts that DEI brings, it's really moving in so many ways. Not just because I am a double minority in the construction industry, right? Many of you can relate. But because DEI really focuses on the culture, and that culture is people. That's why it takes time. That's why it's not a checkbox. That's why it takes each one of us doing our part to help create these concepts that DEI has to offer. It is my hope that you leave here today and really think about what you've gotten. Think about something you heard that was new, said in a different way. I hope you leave here today different than how you came in the room. And I really want to take a moment to just acknowledge the fact that because you are absorbing this information, some of you may be the DEI leader at your workplace. Leader, Tracy? Yes, leader, because you may be that only person in the room who understands DEI that much more in comparison to the whole. So you are able to give that much voice to the concepts and the power that DEI brings to your firm and to your workplace. So I kind of mantle you today as being that type of DEI leader to take the stand that you need to take. After you've gotten all of this awesome information, you can't help but lead in some kind of way. That's what leaders do. And leading in that way makes a difference. That's a part of your legacy. So be aware of that as well. So I want to really give you a call to action, if I can, as we're wrapping up right now. Stay in there with me. Let me keep your attention. Don't think about the parking lot and what you got to do when you leave here yet, okay? I give you a call to action to begin to think about what you can do to set goals, even if it's a personal goal for yourself, that will take you not just from this week in October, Construction Inclusion Week, but will take you through the months ahead until we come back together again and celebrate it. Because again, it is a marathon, it is a journey, it is a continuous implementation of the concepts of DEI. It is not enough to say, oh yeah, the company's doing it. Oh yeah, she's that person, we've got somebody over that already. That's not how DEI works. DEI has to be understood that each one of us has a role to play. It is not enough to say the company's doing it. It's about the culture, it's about each one of us. So therefore, we all have a part to play as it relates to how to be diverse, how to be intentional about creating equity, that fair and level playing field so that even your team member may be able to shadow you, or you can explain something to them that much more so that they can be as successful at completing the task the way you are or the next person. And then how to be intentional about inclusion. Inviting that person to lunch who's new so that they feel that much more included. These are the building blocks that lead to belonging. And we did touch on some of belonging today as well. But D, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you stack those together and the end result should be individuals truly feeling a sense of belonging. Being able to come into the workplace or your organization and feel that they have a seat at the table, they have a voice in the room, and they don't have to change who they are in order to be valued. And they have the same opportunity to create success for your organization just as anyone else would. So that is what I really inspire you in that call to action. If you don't know where to start, if you forget what we talked about today, go over to constructioninclusionweek.com. Tell your neighbor, come on, let's all say it so we get it in there. Constructioninclusionweek.com. There you go. If you don't remember anything else, remember I did that, okay? Go over there. It is a plethora of information, resources, tools. It goes on and on and on. The Big Six, they really did a phenomenal job supporting the construction industry with being able to implement this. So we have no excuses, okay? So go over there, do that. When you do that, you may even want to take the assessment that I mentioned to you. It's a free assessment for yourself or for your firm to take to see where you are. Knowing where you are will help you then begin to create goals. Goals that will take you from today, this week, all the way into next year, so that you're progressively implementing those goals. What steps you're going to take? What does that look like? How can you make a difference? Yeah? Got it? Okay, sweet. So I encourage you to do that. And so now I want to tell you about some further learning, opportunities for learning. We've got good stuff here, but it doesn't stop here. This conference, CIC, Construction Inclusion Conference, we want to make sure you get everything that you can get. So after this portion here, when I leave this stage, we have different stations that are set up. Stations, if you will, where you can get greater in depth on conversations around breaking down what DEI is, how that is really defined, to really understand it, as well as outreach. How you do outreach before the construction actually happens. How do you do that if that's a need that you have? How to understand it. Ways to easily be an ally. How I want to be an ally. I'm new to DEI, or I'm a long time, journeyman in DEI, but how do I really become an ally the way I want to for my own legacy, for my own leadership, right? My own involvement, as well as removing barriers for diversity participation. So we have these stations set up outside. Wendy, raise your hand. Wendy, she's the dynamic coordinator for today. She's put so much together. Give her a round. Yes. Love to you, Wendy. So Wendy, if you have any questions on where those booths or those sessions are out in the lobby area and where they're set up, some of them are?
We're gonna stay in here,
We're
and
gonna
then
stay
it's just point people,
Okay.
point you to the right person.
Okay, so we'll stay in here, and how are we gonna understand who's who, where to
Okay.
go?
Do you mind if I do this while you draw?
So real quick, we wanted to make sure that you had access to the individuals that work this on a day-to-day, knowing that all of you come from different experience levels. So we asked some of our leaders in this situation and who are working this on a regular basis to make themselves available to you, share what they've learned, what they know, their lessons learned, their best tips for how to help you in this. So I've asked the Hensel Phelps team, if I hadn't asked you yet, Rosemary, I'm doing it right now, on allyship, would be able to have that